make a
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. If you could please all take your seats, we will get started. So my name is James Ford. I'm Deputy Head of Mission at the UK delegation to the OSCE based in Vienna, and here today to moderate the plenary session. And I'm delighted to be doing so on what is such an important topic for us at the OSCE. Human rights defenders, of course, play a vital role in promoting and protecting human rights across our region. But as many of you in the room know and experience directly, the pressures on human rights defenders and civil society organizations are growing, including from restrictive laws and shrinking civil space, which is affecting in many cases, your ability to work safely and independently. So the aim of this plenary session is to explore how states can better protect human rights defenders and civil society in advancing human rights and bolstering democratic resilience across the OSCE area. I'm delighted to have an excellent panel of introductory speakers with us this morning, and I will introduce them. We have Ms. Anu Juvonen, Ms. Mariana Katsarova, and Mr. Andras Lederer. So I will give a brief biography of each of you before I then pass to them to give introductory remarks. So Anu Juvonen is the Special Representative of the OSCE Chairperson in Office on Civil Society and the Executive Director of Demo Finland, which is an impartial multi-party democracy support organisation involving all of Finland's 9 parliamentary parties. She's also the President of the European Partnership for Democracy and a member of the Human Rights Delegation of the Finnish National Human Rights Institute. Mariana Katsarova is the United Nations Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Russian Federation. She previously also led the team supporting the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights to monitor and report on the situation in Belarus following the 2020 presidential election. And she also previously led the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission team as head of the regional office in eastern Ukraine. And Andras Lederer is head of advocacy at the Hungarian Helsinki Committee, focusing on international protection and the rule of law. He's also a lecturer at ELTE, Hungary's largest university, and is a fellow of the Obama Foundation Leaders Europe. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining us this morning. I'll pass you for your introductory remarks. Please, I remind you to keep those to around 5 minutes each. And I'll go to you first, Anu. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, colleagues, it is my true pleasure to be here today at the largest European civil society gathering and at this particular session. The topics of this session, freedom of peaceful assembly and association, human rights defenders, national human rights institutions, freedom of thought, conscious religion or belief, are of key relevance for our democracies and for our security. Protecting civic space, the role of human rights defenders and freedom of peaceful assembly are at the core of Finland's foreign and security policy. As OSCE Chair and beyond, Finland prioritizes the importance of free civic space and an enabling environment for civil society actors. Yet, across the OSCE region, the civic space is shrinking. Restrictions on freedom of peaceful assembly are increasing, and human rights defenders face growing challenges in carrying out their work. We need enhanced mechanisms to ensure human rights defenders are able to do their work where they often risk their own lives by calling for the commitments of human rights to all of our benefit. In fact, if we look at the data, according to the latest Civicus report on civic space ratings, only 35% of the OSCE participating states have an open civic space for civil society to operate, and meanwhile 11% have a shrunk civic space that can be labelled as closed. These are alarming figures. I witnessed the rapidity of closing civic space in Georgia during my visit as the special representative in September. I regret that the repression against civil society actors, peaceful protesters and independent journalists continues, despite earlier calls on the Georgian authorities to make alternative choices. However, every day is a new opportunity to change the course of action. We encourage Georgia, as well as many other participating states that are under this data of 11% of shrunk civic space, to follow and implement OSCE commitments related to civil society and the media, including freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and association, as well as political participation. These developments of shrinking and closing civic space are of great concern. We as Chair remain alarmed by the increasing numbers of reprisals against human rights defenders on a global scale and strongly condemn all violence and threats against human rights defenders. In our view, a stable and resilient society recognises plurality and extensive rights of participation. In a resilient society, everyone has the opportunity to contribute, and civil society has a key role in building and maintaining resilience. A resilient participating state is a democracy that promotes equality, respects human rights and the rule of law, and is able to provide comprehensive security for its population within the framework of the rules-based international order. For Finland, human rights defenders are important partners. Civil society actors, including my own organisation, Demo Finland, work tirelessly to advance human rights, democracy and the rule of law. A key milestone in 2025 during the chairpersonship was hosting the civil society discussions on the future of the OSCE on the 1st of August in Helsinki, in parallel with a similar discussion at the political directors level. This was the first time such event took place. As special representative on civil society, I chaired the civil society talks and had the privilege to witness the meaningful engagement between government representatives and civil society actors. We need more of these kind of dialogues. Civil society actors, including human rights defenders, are natural partners for governments in many aspects. We, and here I talk on my capacity as the Executive Director of Demo Finland, help shape policies and actions. This is a really important work of civil society. We act as driver for societal change, and needless to say, of course, we are in key position in holding governments accountable for policies and action. In my view, civil society is an agent for positive change in the society. This we have also witnessed in Finland, a country that was one of the poorest in Europe 100 years ago. Civil society's role in building the welfare state was and is essential, and is really fundamental for the kind of success story Finland has experienced over these 100 years. If we look at all sorts of different global indexes, Finland is quite often on the top. Civil society has really had a fundamental role on this, and I want to underline this. For these and for many factors, the participating states should refrain from limiting the civic space and from restricting freedom of peaceful assembly as well as association. After all, free, strong and independent civil society is a fundamental cornerstone of a functioning democracy. In an enabling environment for civil society, the society maintains and develops its potential and capacity to innovate. Many of the social innovations in Finland came from civil society, baby box, school meals and whatever we are now talking on a global scale for replication. Now, without further ado, let's continue discussions and share experiences on how to address the shrinking and at times closing civic space and support the human rights defenders in our region. I thank you.
Anu, thank you very much. Important reflections on the pressures civil society face across much of our region, and a particularly important point, I think, on the role of civil society in holding us as states to account. Thank you. Mariana, can I pass to you next?
Thank you very much. I hope I can be so strict with the timeline, so please, Your Excellency, encourage me to stop. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, representative of the chairperson in office, Finland, representatives of the OSCE participating states and partners for cooperation, representatives of civil society, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to address this session of the Warsaw Human Dimension Conference, marking 50 years since the Helsinki Final Act, and it's my first at this forum, and I thank for that the chairperson in office. I speak today in my capacity as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Russian Federation, to reflect on the state of fundamental freedoms in Russia in light of the OSCE's core commitments which are grounded in international human rights law and fall directly within the scope of my mandate, which is to monitor, assess, and report on their compliance in the Russian Federation. In this respect, I will refer to the relevant findings from my most recent report presented to the United Nations Human Rights Council on 22nd September. The four themes under discussion today: freedom of peaceful assembly and association, the protection of human rights defenders, the role of national human rights institutions, and freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief, are not only interdependent, but increasingly under siege in the Russian Federation. Their systematic dismantling is not incidental. It is central to the state's strategy of repression at home and aggression abroad. These trends have intensified markedly since February 2022, following the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which has served as a catalyst for escalating repression within Russia itself. For instance, in the 10 years prior to March 22, 336 individuals and organizations were designated as foreign agents. In just the 3.5 years since the full-scale invasion, that number surged to more than 700, reflecting a dramatic escalation in repression following the invasion of Ukraine. Associations focused on specific themes such as human rights, independent journalism, civic education have been systematically criminalized. As of July 2025, 1,040 individuals and organizations had been designated as foreign agents, including human rights lawyers, journalists, and educators. The undesirable organizations label framework has expanded to 245 banned entities, including Amnesty International, Reporters Without Borders, and indigenous-led groups such as the Batani Foundation. Association with these groups is itself a criminal offense. In one emblematic case, Grigory Melkonians, co-chair of the independent election monitoring group Golos, was sentenced to 5 years in prison and banned from public activity for a decade. The right to peaceful assembly has also been all but curtailed in the Russian Federation. In early 2024, over 670 individuals were detained for commemorating the death of Alexei Navalny or protesting military mobilization into the war. In Bashkortostan, a republic of the Russian Federation, 48 people were sentenced to up to 8.5 years in prison for participating in peaceful protests. From mid-24 to mid-25, nearly 4,000 individuals were convicted on administrative or criminal charges for acts of peaceful dissent. These regulatory measures are repressive by design and by effect. They don't aim to guide civic space, they aim to erase it. Their purpose is clear: to silence dissenting voices and shut down independent thought. Human rights defenders in the Russian Federation are targeted with increasing intensity. In 2025 alone, defenders have faced fabricated charges, arbitrary detention, and torture. Elderly activists such as 85-year-old Mark Cooperman in Sakhalin region of Russia have been prosecuted for incitement to terrorism over anti-war views. Historian Yuri Dmitriev, age 69, remains imprisoned despite a cancer diagnosis and denial of medical treatment. Environmental defenders are persecuted with particular ferocity. Between 22 and 25, at least 500 eco-defenders were targeted, including 74 for their anti-war stance. Sergei Kechimov, a shaman of the indigenous Khanty people, who defended sacred lands from oil extraction, died following years of harassment. Lawyers defending political prisoners are themselves imprisoned. In Kaliningrad, Maria Bonsler was detained, denied access to counsel, and subjected to a sham process for her legal work. Women defenders, LGBT activists, and those working with migrants or indigenous communities face compounded risks, including online harassment, sexual violence, and state surveillance. The repression of defenders is not only a violation of individual rights, it is an attack on the very mechanisms of accountability and democratic resilience. Independent oversight mechanisms have been systematically dismantled. The Russian Ombudsman's office has been stripped of independence and credibility. It fails to investigate torture, arbitrary detention, or reprisals, and instead serves as a vehicle for state propaganda very often. Civil society engagement with international mechanisms is criminalized. The Russian Federation and its allies on the ECOSOC Committee on NGOs at the UN, which gives accreditation to civil society, to the UN processes, systematically blocked Russian organizations from obtaining accreditation, exploiting procedural rules and creating obstacles. In 2024, no Russian organization was accredited, and those stripped of domestic registration could not even apply, effectively excluding them from United Nations deliberations. In May, the Batani Foundation, indigenous rights group, was banned as undesirable in direct reprisal for its participation in international forums, including at the United Nations. This hollowing out of institutional independence is a deliberate strategy to shield the state from scrutiny and to deny victims any meaningful remedy. Religious expression is increasingly criminalized when it diverges from state ideology. Clerics from Orthodox, Islamic, Buddhist, and Protestant communities have been imprisoned or exiled for refusing to endorse the war. Nearly 1,000 Jehovah's Witnesses have been prosecuted, many tortured or denied medical care in detention. Imams in Ingushetia were detained for their religious views, and Christian preacher Eduard Charov was tried for justifying terrorism after a sermon opposing the war. The Russian Orthodox Church has been co-opted into the state apparatus, while dissenting voices within religious communities are silenced. The use of religious persecution to enforce ideological conformity is a grave violation of international law and OSCE commitments. Excellencies, dear participants, the Russian Federation's systematic assault on fundamental freedoms is not merely a domestic issue. It is a threat to regional security and the international human rights system. It constitutes a deliberate strategy of repression implemented through the instrumentalization of law, particularly laws on national security or public safety, like terrorism, extremism, and institutions to silence dissent, dismantle civic space, and suppress independent voices. As we mark the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, the third dimension of which, I will remind, is human rights and fundamental freedoms. We must reaffirm that human rights are inseparable from peace and security. The courage of those who continue to resist from inside prison cells, in exile, and within communities under siege reminds us that these freedoms are not negotiable. They are the foundation of our shared commitments and the measure of our collective integrity. I therefore call on OSCE participating states to reaffirm their commitments by actively supporting human rights defenders, ensuring protection of civic space, and strengthening independent oversight mechanisms. This includes upholding the human rights of Russian citizens in need of protection within their jurisdiction by respecting the principle of non-refoulement, particularly for human rights defenders, anti-war activists, journalists, conscientious objectors, LGBT persons, indigenous peoples, and women and girls escaping gender-based violence. Finally, I call on member states to adopt a strategy and increase sustained support to protect dissenters and human rights defenders, both inside the Russian Federation and in exile, including by facilitating visas, enabling the registration and functioning of their organizations abroad, and ensuring access to funding, residency, and family reunification. Do I have more minutes? Not yet. Well, this is my official speech, but you know, coming here, I was wondering, I speak today about the Russian Federation because that's my mandate, but I was wondering and thinking, and these days, this is the question that gives me sleepless nights. How come that we, people in all corners of the world, in all corners of our OSCE region as well, are giving up the freedoms, giving up their human rights voluntarily. And we see in more places in the world and in our regions, leaders come to power who fight against freedoms and against human rights. And this is the question which actually I pose to all of us. And looking to, because there is nothing new under the sun. And our Universal Declaration for Human Rights is now an old woman of 75. The Helsinki Act is, thank God, still 50 years old and has energy to go. I was wondering what has been happening in other times. And you know, I will quote two American leaders, in fact. And the first one is President Ronald Reagan, who said something which we could repeat today and we could ask ourselves. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. And there is another thought by Benjamin Franklin, who was one of the founding fathers of the American Declaration of Independence. Those who desire to give up freedom in order to gain security will not have either one. Ladies and gentlemen, the questions before us for preserving our freedoms from extinction, for preserving the Universal Declaration for Human Rights, for preserving the fundamental freedoms we're discussing today, this is a generational issue. And I do not want our generation to be the one, as President Ronald Reagan said, to see the extinction of our freedoms and of human rights. We have a lot of work to do. And I really encourage you all together to fight for human rights, to preserve the commitments of the OSCE as a regional organization, but also all the commitments of states to international law through the conventions of United Nations. This is very urgent. It's a very urgent task for all of us today. Thank you.
Mariana, thank you very much, powerful thoughts and powerful reporting, and I think particularly a reminder of the importance of following and highlighting individual human rights cases across our region. Thank you. Andras, I'll turn to you now. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, colleagues and friends, it's not that easy to continue and close the introductory remarks. But obviously, I'm very honored to share the stage today with my distinguished co-panelists, because together we reflect the three essential perspectives of the very same ecosystem. You have the international protection framework, leadership of committed states, and the daily reality of defenders on the ground. 2 years ago, at a supplementary human dimension meeting in Vienna, I used a very similar opportunity to highlight the case of an inspirational colleague and friend, Eva Robiško, who faced imprisonment at that time for assisting Syrian refugees at the Latvian-Belarusian border. Her situation remains dire, unfortunately, and many more colleagues and friends, including friends in Tbilisi today, face the cold walls of their prison across the OSCE region. I must apologize, though, that I will not spotlight any single case today. Not because these people don't deserve it, the cause that they are fighting don't deserve it, but because we need systemic solutions to an endemic problem. Earlier this year, I stood in Helsinki, the city where 50 years ago states signed the final act. This time, governments were not alone. Alongside stood civil society organizations from across the OSCE, invited by the Finnish presidency to reflect on the legacy and the future of the Helsinki Principles. These were brief but really meaningful hours, a reminder that security in our region was built not on fear or military power, but on shared principles, trust, and the recognition that human rights are essential to lasting peace. We know that today, unfortunately, that promise is under heavy strain. The OSCE faces sustained pressure, not only from outside threats, but from within. Certain participating states block budgets, undermine institutions, defund key mechanisms, and dismiss their commitments as if they were optional. Some of them adopt laws and narratives that try to delegitimize independent voices, securitize civic space, and label human rights defenders as enemies rather than partners. This is not abstract. Across the region, we see a proliferation of sovereignty protection laws, foreign agent legislation, national security narratives used not to defend free societies, but to silence them. These measures shrink the space in which civil society can operate precisely when defenders are most needed. But we are not just witnesses to decline. We are constitutional actors. In countries where institutions have been captured or eroded, we are often the last to uphold the principles that states signed up 50 years ago. When governments retreat from the Helsinki commitments, defenders step into the void, in courtrooms, in communities, in international fora, to keep those very principles alive. At the Hungarian Helsinki Committee, this is our everyday reality. We litigate before national and international courts, we monitor abuses, we advocate in Brussels, in Strasbourg, in Geneva, or here at the OSCE. Not because this is easy, but because someone must keep the constitutional fabric from unraveling. We are just one organization among many across this region doing the same vital work in growingly difficult contexts. But together we form part of the living infrastructure of the Helsinki spirit. In this context, states that remain committed to the Helsinki Principles do have an opportunity. You can watch as the order erodes, or you can build new alliances, not only with other states, but with those who continue to defend these values on the ground, often at immense personal cost. Civil society is not a marginal player. We are strategic allies in safeguarding the foundations on which the OSCE itself rests. The Finnish chairmanship showed earlier this year that meaningful engagement is possible. By inviting civil society to the 50th anniversary, not as observers, but as partners, they offered a glimpse of what this organization could look like when states treat defenders as allies. This should not be the exception. This should be the model. There is a historical resonance here. In 1975, many governments signed the final act without ever intending to fully respect it. It was civil society, dissidents, activists, defenders, most famously the Moscow Helsinki Group, who gave real meaning to these commitments. It was their courage, their network, their insistence that transformed words on paper into living principles. Back then, these commitments offered a language and framework to those who dared to demand freedom behind closed borders. Today, defenders across our region are their heirs. We may use different tools, litigation, advocacy, even digital tools. But the principle is the same, to hold states to the promises they have made. History teaches us that when civil society and committed states stand together, even the most entrenched regimes can be made to change. If the OSCE is to endure another 50 years, which I very much hope so it will again be the work of people in partnership with committed states that keep this promise alive. And those who believe in this shared order should see defenders not as a problem to manage, but as partners to empower. So I wish ourselves a very fruitful session in the spirit of these votes and the Helsinki principles. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Andres, thank you very much, and very much agree with your point that true security is built on principles and human rights that are at the core of the OSCE's conception of security. So thank you. And thank you to all three of you for your thoughts. So I will now open the meeting to interventions from the floor. Before I do so, I need to run through the rules, the code of conduct of the meeting, which I think most of you will be very familiar with, but I think is important to make clear before we start. So the key things that please I ask all of you to bear in mind are, so when given the floor, please introduce yourself, give your name and the organization that you represent. You can, though, only take the floor on behalf of the organization under which you have registered to attend the conference. Particularly importantly, please remember that the speaking time for interventions is 3 minutes. I will have to, and I will interrupt you at the end of that time, so I strongly encourage you to keep your intervention to 3 minutes or even before the 3 minutes. So thank you in advance for that. Equally importantly, please keep your contribution on the topic, as well as being relatively brief, and also to facilitate the work of our brilliant interpreters, please speak clearly and slowly as well. The proceedings should also be held in a respectful manner and in line with the code of conduct of this conference. So please absolutely bear that in mind at all times during your interventions. Conference participants can also submit written documents. That can be done online via the conference platform, and they will then be made available to all registered participants. Delegations of OSCE participating states may exercise their right of reply, and that's regarding any statement regarding from any other participant in line with the meeting rules. Those rights of reply must be announced at the head table during the session, and you then submit them in writing online to the conference platform. If there is any registered participant who wants to raise a procedural issue, you can do so directly, again, with representatives of the CIO at the head table, not from the floor. And then all meeting rules and the code of conduct are published on the event website. And they apply, of course, to all events at this conference, including plenary sessions, side events, and other areas of the event venue. So thank you very much for listening carefully to that. And I appreciate very much your adherence to those rules so that we can have a constructive, rich discussion. So I will now move to opening the floor. I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the speakers list. That's available for consultation. It's displayed around the room as well as on the conference platform. And I'll now turn to the first speaker on my list for your intervention. So I will give the floor, please, to the Karakalpak diaspora in the USA. Thank you. You have the floor.
Karakalpak diaspora USA. I'm not disclosing my name and identity because of the fear of a repressive Uzbekistan government. In July 2022, Uzbekistan forces unleashed hell on peaceful protesters in Karakalpakstan. Stun grenades, live-round military-grade weapons shredding crowds, demanding their rights. Hundreds were killed and wounded, over 500 jailed and tortured. 3 years later, no real probe, no justice, just stonewalling. The government won't release names of officers who pulled triggers, fueling suspicions they are scapegoating ethnic Karakalpaks, pinning blame on their own to dodge fallout. Take Polat Shamshetov, a law enforcement officer who refused lethal orders. He was imprisoned because of that, then murdered in custody. Silence forever. Zero tolerance for thought in Uzbekistan, and they're crushing particularly Karakalpak people. For instance, Murat Najimov, disabled activist, beaten bloody for Telegram posts criticizing the regime. Cops burst into his home and beat him up severely. This is not isolated case. The whole region is gauged. Internet choked, voices vanish. Demand transparency. Force Uzbekistan to name killers, free defenders, and end censorship. Uzbekistan officials at the OSCE cling to Soviet ghosts, calling our sovereign republic of Karakalpakstan Karakalpakia. Speaks on truth of our constitution, Uzbekistan's constitution, which states Sovereign Republic Karakalpakstan. That's our name, our identity, not a relic of red Soviet tyranny. Stop erasing us with outdated labels. Honor the sovereignty we fought for, or admit you are still bowing to Moscow's shadow. Respect the Republic of Karakalpakstan, not your Soviet fantasy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll now move to the next speaker on the list, which is the political opposition movement Erkin Uzbekistan. Thank you. You have the floor.
Доброе утро, дамы и господа.
Hello and a very good morning, Hassan. This is opposition movement of Uzbekistan. I am very, very sorry that the representatives of the Karakalpakstan community abroad for the propaganda of Russian mir, the Russian peace, and they organize provocations. In November, there was supposed to be a side event organized by the Uzbek delegation. I wanted to take part in that side event because one of the speakers was the ombudsman, and I had some questions to that ombudsman. And when I arrived at this open side event, Golzita Nurmbietova, who always talks about the fact that her rights are being violated in Uzbekistan, she started offending me, and no longer with tears. She was giving me a a funny smile. And another member of Karakal, Pakistan, Dushpagai Mirikmedov, demanded that I abandon this official open side event. In his eyes, I saw a threat. There were many of them. I was alone. There were around 7 or 8 people, and I was forced to leave that side event in order not to turn it into a theater or a spectacle, and I didn't want to follow their demands. This is unacceptable. International platforms should not be turned into local platforms where the narratives of the Russian Federation are being lobbied and promoted under the pretense of human rights violations in Russian Federation. They actually force and promote violence, and I think this event should investigate this event, and we include the Uzbek delegation. So why do they permit the so-called civil society members to use the language of force vis-à-vis their opponents? It is really important that the organizers of this conference make an official statement and adopt disciplinary measures against Gulzoda Nuburbetova and Kushkarbay Nurbetov, who threatened me. I felt that. I saw that. It was in their eyes. We are on the side of open dialogue with all forces, and we respect their statements and their claims, but they should
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to the third speaker. Before I do so, please I'll remind participants to remain on the topic of this session, which is about human rights defenders and civil society, as well as freedom of peaceful assembly, association, national human rights institutions, and freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief. Thank you. I'll pass to the third speaker, which is the Human Rights Center, Glosien. Thank you. You have the floor.
Добрый день. Меня зовут
Rustam Zhantasov. I represent Kazakhstan, Astana, the Human Rights Center, Glosien. I'm going to speak about the freedom of associations and peaceful assembly. It's almost impossible in Kazakhstan, in Astana, because local authorities and central authorities do not give a permission to organize peaceful assemblies and associations, and notification is also not accepted. People are fined, and administrative law is applied against those who take part in assemblies, peaceful assemblies. So in accordance with the article on assembly and association, 376 cases were looked into in courts, and 97% of them ended in fines, in detentions, and warrants. 53,000 euros is the amount of all the fines used against participants of peaceful assembly and association. So the freedom of peaceful assembly and association is limited. Ministry of Justice refuses to register foundations and human rights organizations. One of them received refusal 6 times because as a justification it was said that there was need for such an NGO to be registered. So all over the country, these refusals are used. It is much more difficult to open a NGO compared to businesses and entrepreneurial activity. The law on foreign agents is used and signed by the Ministry of Justice of Kazakhstan in cooperation with the Ministry of Justice in the Russian Federation. All these cases indicate that civil society is shrinking in Kazakhstan. The state is afraid of a peaceful assembly, of association, of organizations of civic society, and this fear persists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll move to the fourth speaker on my list, which is the Karakal Pakistan News Channel. Thank you.
Hello, dear participants of the conference. I came here to tell you about the voice of my people and describe our real situation. I'm a simple person. I'm a blacksmith. I'm not a politician. We live in the 21st world. We have technologies, sciences, progress. But what is happening currently? One side starts the war, the second side helps, the third sells weapons, and common people die. This is not a civilization. This is a shame. I think this is a shame for the whole world. How many mothers will have to lose their children? Dear participants, I am a simple blacksmith, and I am sitting here at this esteemed platform, testifies about the crisis when a simple person should resemble the world about their responsibility. It's a crisis. If UN and OSCE work, why do wars continue? Where are the outcomes of your work? How long should we wait? People are tired of waiting. We want to see real actions. Common people are not protected, and those in power keep silence. Should it be like this? Who will help my people in Karakal, Pakistan? So that's why I am here. Thank you very much for your attention. Please stop the genocide. Thank you for your attention.
So we'll now move to the next speaker on the list, which is Think Out. You have the floor.
Thank you, dear moderator, dear delegates. I'm Botwana Schilik. I'm here on behalf of the Belgian NGO Think Out, representing the minority groups in Belgium. All the topics on today's agenda, particularly in Western countries, but also across all OSCE member states, in our view, are shaped by a chain of interconnected events. The goal is ideal democratic representation. The starting point is freedom of thought, expression, and belief. The process that begins with freedom of thought and leads to ideal democratic representation takes shape according to the different forms of pressure applied by each country. Failing to provide environments where people can express themselves and withholding civil society support derived from the taxes they pay is a violation of freedom of expression. Blocking religious practices under various pretexts or reinterpreting the law in ways that restrict freedom of worship, if not in line with legal standards, is a violation of the right of worship. Preventing the development of representative institutions, refusing to support them, not opening paths for them, and excluding them from platforms where they can voice their concerns or ideas, then blaming them for not progressing or refusing to recognize them is a violation of freedom. For groups of society facing such violations, even thinking about the right to assembly becomes difficult. A legal system which should always be the first and last resort, which should be the first and last resort that delivers continuous politically motivated rulings, is the greatest blow that can be dealt to law, human rights, and freedoms. Unfortunately, this is now a frequent event. Today, most of the European courts have been delivering rulings that are not in line with these rights. A closer examination of the Belgian state's practices and attitudes towards Muslims reveal that they serve as a laboratory example of all these infractions. If even states at the heart of Europe, the modern world, violate freedoms to this extent, how can anyone in the rest of the world sincerely speak of rights and freedoms or genuinely even believe in them? That is for you to decide. In terms of human rights, the legal texts are already sufficient. The only remaining option is for national courts across all countries to step in and prevent political violations by governments. To achieve this, a comprehensive effort and the commitment of institutions like the OSCE are urgently needed. Thank you.
And I thank you. Now to speaker number 6 on my list, which is the Yangurik Initiative Group. Thank you.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги.
Good morning, dear colleagues. Let me discuss the achievements in Uzbekistan as regards simplification of registration of non-governmental organizations and observing freedom of peaceful assembly and association. Lately, we have proven that we follow freedoms and human rights. And the update of the legislation is underway to foster the freedom of speech and expression. 10,000 NGOs in Uzbekistan and more than 3,000 religious associations. 2018, the president in 2018 decided to limit bureaucratic barriers to diminish the red tape when registering NGOs and other organizations of civic society. Legislation does not only simplifies the decisions and the permissions to hold peaceful assembly. International agreements signed by Uzbekistan and national law, when there are some discrepancies, the international law applies. So we follow international rules and freedoms in the area of human rights, following human rights. So civil society, political movements, and democratic institutions are strengthened. Taking this opportunity, let me draw attention to the following fact. Guzurban Narumbekova, who covers her face during the last 3 days, tried to announced that she represents the Karakalpakstan diaspora, and she presents herself as a person under threat, whereas it is not difficult to identify her, and the Karakalpak community is not threatened in any way.
Keep on the topic of the session. Thank you. If you've concluded your remarks, we will move on. Thank you very much. So speaker number 7 is the Western Thrace Minority University Graduates Association.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I am Kerem Abdurrahimoğlu, and I am representing the Turkish minority in Western Thrace, Greece, as a member of Western Thrace Minority University Graduates Association. Distinguished participants, minorities are the most vulnerable groups in terms of violation of freedom of association, freedom of thought, religion, or belief. The Turkish minority living in Western Thrace faces various restrictions and violations in terms of aforementioned fundamental freedoms. The Turkish minority is deprived of the right to freedom of association, as it is not permitted to establish associations with the word Turkish in their names. Historical associations of the minority were shut down 4 decades ago, and applications for registration of new associations were rejected. In this regard, European Court of Human Rights decisions in case of Xanti-Turkish Union and others, known as Bekirusta group of cases, have not been implemented since 2008. Committee of Ministers of Council of Europe shared its concern several times for this unlawful treatment of Greece against the victims. After 17 years of non-execution, the Committee of Experts established by the Greek authorities to examine these cases has submitted its evaluation to the parties. Nevertheless, it remains impossible to foresee the concrete measures the government will take to remedy the ongoing unlawfulness and the resulting suffering. Furthermore, European Court of Human Rights has found Greece in violation of freedom of association once again for the case Culture Association of Turkish Women in Xanthi province in June of 2025. Greece also intervenes in the religious affairs of the Turkish minority by appointing imams and muftis in a way that contradicts its traditions and social structure. In this context, both the muftis elected by the minority and human rights defenders who openly articulate their Turkish identity and challenges faced by the minority are continuously demonized and subjected to public targeting. This situation in Western Thrace also gives rise to a serious problem of freedom of expression. Indeed, human rights defenders are not only subjected to insults and humiliation on online platforms, but also face attempts at intimidation throughout financial investigations and court proceedings. Therefore, as the members of the Turkish minority, we call upon to Greece, recognize the Turkish identity of the minority, seize the violation of freedom of association and implement decisions of European Court of Human Rights, respect religious institutions of the minority, and protect human rights defenders living in Western Thrace and in Greece general. I thank you.
And thank you. The next speaker on my list is the National Human Rights Center of the Republic of Uzbekistan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. The Republic of Uzbekistan attaches great importance to strengthening fundamental freedoms and human rights in line with its international commitments under the OSCE. In recent years, Uzbekistan has carried out the wide-ranging reforms aiming at developing civil society, enhancing human rights institutions, and fostering an open dialogue between the state and society. In 2023, Uzbekistan adopted a new constitution that guarantees the right to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, and association in full accordance with the OSCE Copenhagen document. Today, more than 10,000 non-governmental organizations operated across the country. The government continues to reduce administrative barriers for NGOs. Recent regulation has simplified registration procedure and funding mechanisms to provide consultative and methodological support for large social projects. In 2025, a new law was adopted to strengthen the legal guarantees of NGO activities. It introduces penalties for unlawful interference by public officials and new measures to ensure transparency in public oversight and charitable fundraising. These measures are aimed at building a sustainable and open civil society where NGOs are equal partners of the state, in full accordance with the OSCE commitments of freedom of association. Uzbekistan also maintains a policy of zero tolerance for violence and considers human rights defenders as the partners in building an open society consistent with the OSCE commitments on protection of human rights defenders. Our new constitution has guaranteed national human rights institutions constitutional status and reinforcing their independence. The Ombudsman and the Commissioner for Child Rights operated in line with the Paris Principle and the OSCE Moscow document. Last year, Ombudsman's powers was expanded to include independent monitoring of detention facilities and the review of individual complaints. The National Human Rights Strategy, adopted in 2020, remains a key framework to human rights policy in Uzbekistan. The National Center for Human Rights monitors its implementation and reports to the President, Parliament, and Government. A new strategy up to 2030 is now being prepared on focusing on protection of human rights and promotion of legal culture. Uzbekistan will continue to strengthen its human rights guarantees, expand cooperation with the civil society, and closely cooperate with the OSCE. I thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on my list is number 9, Connection EV. You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies and colleagues, I'm honored to speak on behalf of an organization which has been advocating for more than 30 years for the rights of conscientious objectors to military service. As defined by the UN Human Rights Committee in its General Comment 22 and in following Human Rights Council resolution, the right to conscientious objection to military service is inherent to the human right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. Although it is thus universal and not derogable, it is constantly violated and hundreds of individuals are persecuted and often forced to seek protection abroad. For instance, the European Court for Human Rights has defined the condition of conscientious objectors in Turkey as civil death. In Israel, conscientious objectors are sentenced to repeated disciplinary punishment in military prison. In the context of the ongoing war of aggression of the Russian Federation in Ukraine and the forced mobilization in the Russian-occupied territories, refusal to serve could end in punitive fines or detention. In the Russian Federation, there is a lack of implementation of the constitutional right to conscientious objection to military service, which affects military personnel, such as contract soldiers trying to resign, men forcibly mobilized, and reservists. We strongly reiterate the recommendation of the UN Special Rapporteur to all member states at the last session of the Human Rights Council, just recalled today, to uphold the human rights of Russian citizens in need of protection within their jurisdiction by respecting the principle of non-refoulement in regard to, in particular, human rights defenders, anti-war activists, independent journalists, and media professionals, conscientious objectors to military service, and individuals who have refused forced mobilization to the war against Ukraine. Many Belarusian conscientious objectors and deserters are seeking protection abroad, and those who could flee the country are at risk of being deported back to Belarus, where they can face criminal prosecution, torture, and long-term imprisonment. In Ukraine, we have been reporting a de facto suspension of the human right to conscientious objection to military service. We recall the Venice Commission opinion and await for a positive outcome of constitutional complaints by, for instance, Vitaly Alexienko, who objected on religious grounds. Many conscientious objectors are also human rights defenders, and many groups and individuals advocating for their rights are often persecuted and discriminated against. We thus call for their protection, for instance, for the human rights defender Yuri Shelyatsenko. We would like as well to recall some of the recommendations of the OSCE, ODAHR, listed in the Handbook on Human Rights and Armed Forces. Conscientious objection should be available both for conscript and for professional soldiers, both prior to and during military service. Conscientious objectors should not be subject to repeated punishment for failure to perform military service. Alternative service should be compatible with the reasons for conscientious objection of a non-combatant or civilian nature in the public interest and not punitive. Alternative service should be performed under a purely civilian administration. In conclusion, we call on Member States to protect and fully implement the right to conscientious objection to military service, which is inherent in Article 18, and grant asylum to conscientious objectors who seek protection abroad in line with
Please,
UNHCR
could you conclude your
guidelines.
remarks?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. The next speaker on my list is the delegation of Switzerland. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Anne-Catherine Stolz from the Swiss mission to the OSCE. Switzerland has a long-standing tradition of supporting the work of human rights defenders and was among the first countries to develop guidelines for their protection. Human rights defenders play a fundamental role in promoting security and preventing violence and conflict. First, human rights defenders tackle the root causes of violence and unrest by addressing human rights violations, injustices, discrimination, and inequality. Second, they are agents of positive change. They foster dialogue among different groups, promoting social cohesion and working towards fair, safe, and inclusive societies. Third, they are early warning actors by observing and documenting human rights violations and democratic backsliding. Their reports enable timely action before tensions escalate into conflict. Thus, human rights defenders play a crucial role in implementing the OSCE's concept of comprehensive security. True national security is achieved through justice, inclusion, and accountable governance, not repression. Yet, across participating states, we are witnessing an increasing criminalization of their peaceful activities, as well as intimidation and surveillance. We are concerned that the concept of national security, public order, or sovereignty are too frequently invoked to justify restrictions of their work. The 2014 OSCE guidelines on the protection of human rights defenders reaffirm that the right to defend human rights is universally recognized. Switzerland stresses that this is not an abstract obligation, but a living commitment that requires political will, robust legal frameworks, and concrete protective measures. We have a responsibility to counter measures which restrict civil space and to act decisively to protect human rights defenders and their work. Wherever they operate, human rights defenders must be shielded from arbitrary treatment and detention, as well as threats, violence, and reprisals, including for their engagement with international and regional human rights mechanisms. We call on states to release without delay those human rights defenders who are arbitrarily detained. As the incoming chair, Switzerland is committed to their protection and to reinforce the role of democratic institutions and the protection of fundamental freedoms. We are convinced that a society that protects human rights defenders strengthens its own foundations of peace, security, democracy, and human dignity. I delivered a abridged version of my statement. We will circulate the full version. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on my list is the delegation of Germany. Thank you.
Thank you. Christoph Blosen, delegation of Germany. I deliver this statement on behalf of the European Union and the following participating states: Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Norway, Republic of Moldova, and Ukraine. And I encourage you to discover the full version of the statement on the website of our session. Freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom of association, and freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief are fundamental to open and democratic societies and are the basis for the work of human rights defenders and civil society organizations. OSCE participating states have committed to guarantee those rights to every individual without discrimination. The EU deeply regrets that the rights of peaceful assembly and of association are being restricted and violated in various parts in the OSCE region. As highlighted by the Moscow mechanism, violations are particularly widespread in Russia and Belarus and in the Ukrainian territories temporarily and illegally occupied by Russia. In Russia, drastic measures to suppress opposing voices have created a climate of fear and intimidation. The EU stands in solidarity with those who strive for an open and democratic Russia. In Belarus, the rights to freedom of assembly and association have been severely violated. In Georgia, the authorities have resorted to intimidation tactics and violence to silence dissenting voices. Peaceful protesters have been targeted for exercising their fundamental rights. We strongly urge Georgia to continue to constructively engage with OSCE institutions and make use of their expertise. Freedom of religion or belief remains high on the EU's international human rights agenda. We promote and protect the right for everybody to have or not to have a religion or belief, as well as the freedom to change their religion or belief and to manifest their religion or belief, in public or in private, alone or in community. The EU unequivocally condemns all acts of discrimination, intolerance, violence, or persecution, including those based on grounds of religion or belief, and rejects any form of incitement to religious hatred. The EU will continue to support the work of national human rights institutions, as well as human rights defenders and civil society organizations. The EU calls on all OSCE participating states to ensure that NHRIs are independent, receive the necessary human and financial resources, and are systematically consulted in all relevant policy-making and legislative processes. And to close on a positive note, the EU Human Rights Defenders Mechanism has supported more than 85,000 individuals from 113 countries since its establishment in 2015. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on my list is the First Department. You have the floor.
Уважаемые представители государств,
Dear representatives of member states, representatives of civil society, Max Alenchev, I'm a human rights lawyer from the First Department organization. Starting with the full-scale war against Ukraine, repression against civil society has aggravated. 1,000 of journalists, LGBTQI activists, and human rights defenders had to flee the situation. Many have been classified, labeled as foreign agents. Civic initiatives and civil society organizations are delegalized, so there is a crackdown on any civic activity. Those who flee the country have problems receiving Schengen visas. They don't have a place to live. They have to flee the situation in Russia because criminal investigations are used against them. And since 2022, a number of European countries have undertaken steps to support Russian and Belarusian human rights defenders. Germany, Poland, Lithuania, thank you. Germany was the first to offer humanitarian visas to human rights defenders from Russia and Belarus because these people are under threat of prosecution. Unfortunately, the program has been discontinued and only in emergency cases these humanitarian visas are issued. Fight against illegal migration means that human rights defenders from Russia and Belarus cannot leave their countries, which means that people in Belarus and Russia suffer if they are involved in civic activity. Please, we appeal to Germany to open up the program for humanitarian visas to human rights defenders from Russia and Belarus. Lithuania and Poland are still issuing humanitarian visas, which is the best practice example in the region of the OSCE. When Russian human rights defenders can leave their country, they will fight for human rights abroad and in their home country. So please issue Schengen visas to democratic activists from Russia and Belarus. They are under threat of their personal integrity, whereas propaganda activists from Russia can travel across Europe. This is not something we can agree with. There is a new wall between Russia and Europe. We have to offer solidarity, trust to human rights defenders from Russia and Belarus. So those involved in civic activity, anti-war activists, human rights defenders have to be supported. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on the list is number 13, the NGO Central Asia Progress and Integration Forum. Thank you.
Здравствуйте.
Hello, dear conference participants, ladies and gentlemen. I represent an NGO. Today we talk about human rights, freedom of thought, belief, etc. It has very important meaning for today's states, is the basis for national stability. National human rights mechanisms fulfill a very important role. They become a bridge between the government and the society. Their independence, openness, ability to react to people's appeal is the criteria, indicator of the state's maturity in the area of human rights. They should not act only formally, but should really protect human rights and freedoms, including monitoring and interaction with international organizations. The freedom of thought and belief is one of the fundamental rights contained in the Universal Human Rights Declaration. It stipulates not only having rights, but also freedom to express them, to believe or not to believe at all. So national mechanisms and institutions for the protection of the freedom of thought are of key importance. And nevertheless, NGOs should also be honest and transparent in their activities, and not to create grounds for us to be punished for being double-faced. I've observed a series of civil society representatives that actually behave in a shameful way, I'd say. For example, I also would like to give some examples. Ms. Nurumbetova, Mr. Bigburatov talked about sterilization of women in Karakalpakstan. Can they provide any evidence to their words? OSCE platform is the place where we can express our thoughts, but dear organizers, I believe that we really need to ask for real proof, evidence from those speaking, especially from our friends from Karakalpakstan. They talk about allegedly hundreds of people murdered and imprisoned during the events in Karakalpakstan, which is a clear lie. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. The next speaker on my list is the number 14, Media Freedom of Karakalpakstan. You have the floor.
Dear colleagues, I'm a civil society activist from Karakalpakstan. Today I'm going to tell you about the fear of people who are talking about or disclosing the deportations from Uzbekistan, and they are being deprived of freedom. The first example, a man was extradited from Karakalpakstan, and he was sentenced to 2 years or 3 months of imprisonment. And it is said that this is a politically motivated arrest and detention. Another person who was traveling from Russia in December last year, and he was put under home arrest for 4 years and 7 months. Human rights defenders are also considering this case to be politicized. And these are not just examples, but very often what happens is that activists are not returned to their countries in Europe, because when they are returned to their countries, then they are facing threats, lack of freedom, imprisonment, and so on. Another person was sentenced in Tajikistan for 23 years of imprisonment. Many activists cannot receive the status of a refugee in countries such as Poland and others, even though if I return to my country, I might be tortured and imprisoned. So I call upon everyone to take a look at people who are activists and who defend human rights to ensure protection, because they are faced with imminent threats. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on my list is Public Fund Nomad Rights. You have the floor.
Уважаемые коллеги.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear moderator, I am the practicing lawyer in the area of human rights. I work in Kazakhstan and represent defendants whose rights are violated. At least 8 cases of pressure on citizens who wanted to take part in peaceful assembly were violated. In Kazakhstan, even an intent to organize a peaceful assembly is a reason for law enforcement authorities to persecute these people. Preventive measures and intimidation is used. They are invited to so-called interviews. There is pressure in their workplaces, and there is interference in their family lives, and pressure on their children is used. Digital surveillance is applied. Instagram, TikTok, and other social media posts are surveilled, and people are invited to police stations for preventive interviews. So digital surveillance and preventive measures bring about self-censorship, and people are afraid of discussing socially viable issues. There is also pressure and intimidation of those who represent defendants at courts. We can be victims of fines, administrative measures, whenever we represent interests of our clients in courts, which means that the independence of legal profession is undermined, and we cannot actually defend effectively human rights in courts. Please appeal to the authorities of Kazakhstan so that they implement their commitments in the area of human rights. We appeal to the state of Kazakhstan to take actions against intimidation in Petropavlovsk in the northern region of Kazakhstan. Please, we appeal to ODIHR and the OSCE to support civil society in Kazakhstan, which plays a key role in documenting violation of human rights. Thank you for your kind attention.
And thank you.
Спасибо. Следующий выступающий делегация.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Kati Berman. I am Human Rights Ambassador of Finland. Mr. Chair, Finland aligns itself with the EU statement and would like to add the following in its national capacity. The topics of this session are all of fundamental importance, and we are very happy to see UN Special Rapporteur Mariana Katsarova with us today. Excellencies, dear colleagues, to safeguard human rights, democracy, and comprehensive security, we must protect and maintain an open and vibrant civic space, the shrinking of which has become a pressing concern across the whole OSCE region. Civil society actors, including human rights defenders in all their diversity, work tirelessly and often at high personal risk to advance human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, and to hold governments accountable. National human rights institutions act in a similar role, and their independence and capacity must be protected. Yet civil society actors and human rights defenders are increasingly facing challenges in carrying out their work at home, in exile, and across borders. And this is what we also heard from all the panelists today, as well as several civil society representatives that are here today. The rising number of reprisals is alarming, both offline and online, and Finland strongly condemns all such actions. Supporting human rights defenders is an integral part of Finland's foreign and security policy. In 2022, we updated the Foreign Service guidelines to help our embassies support human rights defenders around the world. Earlier this year, the ministry, as well as the Finnish organization Artists at Risk and the city of Helsinki, launched a pilot program to provide temporary support and protection to human rights defenders. During its chairpersonship of the OSCE, Finland advocates for more opportunities for civil society actors, including human rights defenders, and we work closely with civil society representatives. We aim to create more spaces for the civil society to participate in a meaningful manner. To continue these discussions, I would like to extend an invitation to our side event that will be held today at 2:30 p.m. in this very plenary hall. At this event, we will explore how civic engagement strengthens societal resilience at the local level. Also later today, the OSCE chairperson in office, Special Representative on Civil Society, will present the civil society roadmap for the OSCE. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
And thank you to you. I just briefly say thank you to all those of you who have intervened so far. It's been a wide-ranging discussion covering many of the challenges and threats that human rights defenders face across the region. I'm keen that we allow as many people as possible to speak on the speakers list and indeed on the reserve list as well, so I will keep on moving through relatively quickly and remind you again, please do keep to your 3 minutes. Thank you. The next speaker on my list is the Baku Initiative Group. Thank you. You have the floor.
Dear moderator, distinguished delegates, my name is Abbas Abbasov. I represent the Baku Initiative Group. Freedom of thought, conscience, religion, and belief is a cornerstone of international law. Until now, in the French overseas territories, this freedom exists only on paper. In practice, France continues to impose policies and cultural assimilation that systematically undermines the spiritual and cultural identities of entire peoples. In Kanaki, New Caledonia, indigenous belief systems or practices are pushed to the margins, presented as mere folklore for museums rather than living traditions deserving respect. In Martinique, Guadeloupe, religions rooted in African heritage are discredited, their practitioners treated with suspicion. In Mayotte, where the population is predominantly Muslim, France weaponizes the principles of laicite, secularism, to marginalize Islam and delegitimize local cultural practices. This is not neutrality, and it's not respect for diversity. It is a colonial misuse of law to enforce domination. Such policies constitute cultural violence, which is no less destructive than political or economic exploitation. History reminds us that France is not alone in this practice. Belgium's colonial period in Congo also sought to erase indigenous beliefs and impose foreign norms, leaving deep scars on cultural and spiritual lives that remain visible to this day. Freedom of belief is not simply the right to pray quietly in private. It is the right of nations to preserve their heritage, to transmit their traditions to future generations, and to live according to values shaped by their own histories. By denying this, France violates Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, both of which it claims to uphold. France must end its assimilation policies, withdraw from its colonies, and allow the peoples of Kanaki, Martinique, Guadeloupe, Mayotte, and others to determine their own cultural and spiritual futures. Until that happens, every speech delivered by France about human rights remains nothing more than an empty mask hiding the face of colonial oppression. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on my list is the Dayanch civil movement platform. Thank you. You have the floor. If the speaker is not present, we will move on to the next speaker. So that is number 19 on my list, the Karakalpak branch of Uzbekistan Children and Families Support Association.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги, участники конференции.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, participants of our conference. Speaking of the right of conscience, belief, freedom of religion and belief, and we know that in Uzbekistan it is written down in legislation that we follow these fundamental principles. Freedom of belief is possible only in secular states. So interfaith and interreligious cooperation and dialogue is extremely important. As part of the state policy, there is a platform for dialogue and building interfaith dialogue and cooperation and ties. It is very important, fundamental for the fostering of rights and cultural traditions and legacy. Dialogue, cooperation as part of this concept builds and fosters peace in Uzbekistan, and it helps us to foster the cooperation of the society based on respect and trust. I represent the Uzbekistan Children and Family Support Association in Karakalpakstan, and I have taken part in many discussions at this forum. Big Muratov, who takes the floor, who represents himself and claims he is a human rights defender, actually avoids his alimony obligation, doesn't pay his child support to his own children. And his speeches are written by some other organizations and people because it is clear he doesn't understand what he's talking about. And this annual event, is used as an opportunity to visit Poland and to be migrants in this country. For example, in 2019, some of them participated in the conference and reside in Poland. So, dear organizers of this conference, please pay attention to this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to the next speaker, which is the Naila Center for Social Support, Legal Promotion and Monitoring in the Uzbekistan.
Dear moderator, dear participants, I'm the head of the Naila Center, and today's topic is really important. In Uzbekistan, recently there's cooperation between NGO and government in order to protect human rights. Our center hold monitoring in our region, and over 30 laws and bylaws were adopted as we identified. A social center for protection of population and its branches were actually established in every town and region. We have several thousand social workers working in the country now. Also, they established social partnerships between NGOs and the state. We organize social control groups that protect the interests of the local population as well as ensure human rights and freedoms. Based on the experience of our region, we can say that by 2030 there will be no poor people in our region. And now we are capable of providing free health care services, and other organizations provide legal aid in cooperation with justice bodies and justice agencies and international organizations, including the United Nations. I was really happy to meet during the break the head of one of the departments with the Helsinki University with which we cooperated. Yesterday, our colleagues mentioned that no one persecutes you in Karakalpakstan, in Uzbekistan. If your rights are violated, you can turn to the ombudsman or the representative of the Commissioner of National Minorities, who is even present in the room. Here we can see our nationals who used to live in our country. They were charged with corruption charges and falsification charges and later fled the country. Now they're trying to lie to the international community. They either do not know or do not want to acknowledge the real role of the civil society in our country. If you really want to know, please visit our country, talk to the people, and you will see how people's life has changed. We would be happy to meet you in Uzbekistan and to cooperate with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to remind all participants when you make your interventions to please not refer aggressively or intimidate other participants, and please keep focused on the subject of the meeting. Thank you. The next speaker on my list is 21, the Public Foundation for National Endowment for Prosperity. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Daulet. I'm here for NGO National Endowment for Prosperity. When we talk about peaceful assembly and association, it sounds formal, but in reality it's very simple. It means people have the right to come together, speak their mind and act together without any fear. It can be students starting a club, workers forming a union, or neighbors meeting in the square. Why does it matter? Because these freedoms are the daily heartbeat of democracy. When people gather freely, they share problems, build trust, and push for solutions. Associations and community groups give people the tools to turn frustration into action. But today, we see real challenges. In many countries, organizing peaceful event requires endless paperwork. Sometimes peaceful events requires met with violence instead of dialogue. Fear grows and participation suffers. What can be done? Me, myself, as an expert from non-government organization and a member of Youth Rights Commission under the Commissioner for Human Rights of the Republic of Kazakhstan, see some clear steps. Fair rules, organizing peaceful assemblies should be simple and safe. Notification, not endless permission. Protection online. Platforms must be transparent and respect the rights of organizers. Support for youth. Small grants, safe spaces, and quick approvals can help young people to play their role in society. These steps are not complicated, they are common sense. Freedom of assembly is not a threat, it's a safety valve. It prevents anger from turning into conflict. So let's not measure democracy only by elections. Let's measure it by how easy it is for people to meet, to speak, and to act together any day of the year. Because when people can gather freely, democracy breathes.
My name is Hussein Suleiman. I'm the director of the National. I'm continuing this.
I'm sorry to interrupt. My understanding is I'm only allowed one speaker.
But we are the same guys. He's my deputy. I'm the director.
But I need to seek clarification on that from the chairpersonship. Thank you. They've confirmed you may speak. I will allow you more time to finish. Thank you.
Mr. Daulet is the youngest expert of my foundation, and he's 42 years younger than me, and I'm happy that he was quickly speaking to you. And I want to add several points to this theme today. It's the Constitution of Kazakhstan guarantees citizens the right to peaceful assembly, including the right to hold rallies and demonstrations. Restrictions may be imposed only by lowland solely to protect the constitutional order, public safety, health, morals, and the right of others. This fully aligns with the international standards. When violations are identified during peaceful assemblies, participants are first informed and explained the legal rules. Responsibility is considered only in exceptional cases, when there are clear signs of disturbance of public order. The final decision is made by the court. Practice also confirms this. In 2024, 177 cases were registered for violations of procedure for holding peaceful assemblies. While in 2025, the number of cases decreased by more than half to 73. Actually, As a result of the 2022 constitutional reforms, the status of the Ombudsman has been significantly strengthened and enshrined in both constitutional
Please now
and
conclude your
constitutional
remarks.
law.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on my list is number 22, Savar Center for Information and Analysis. You have the floor.
Уважаемый модератор, уважаемые
Dear moderator, dear participants, Olga Sidorova, I represent the Analytical and Information Center, SAVA. I'd like to draw your attention to several issues concerning freedom of religion or belief in Russia today. The list of religious organizations declared undesirable in Russia kept growing. Last year, Brigham Young University, founded by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the charitable foundation Peace Unto All, which provides help for anti-war Russian Orthodox clergy priests, were added to this list. Followers of organizations already on the list were subjected to administrative and criminal prosecution more often. We are seeing new cases being initiated. Criminal sentences have been passed. For example, in Moscow, a court sentenced 3 individuals to 3 to 4 years in prison for cooperation with the All-Ukrainian Spiritual Center Renaissance and its charitable branch. More religious figures, both clergy and laity, were declared foreign agents. At the beginning of October, the list included 9 priests alone. Most of them had already been forced to leave Russia by the time they were added to the list. The tightening of migration policy has resulted in increased pressure on Muslim communities. Law enforcement authorities have been increasingly conducting raids to identify illegal migrants. The raids often disrupt religious services. Muslim prayer houses in various regions are being closed or suspended. This is happening especially often in Moscow and the Moscow region, which had been experiencing a shortage of mosques even before. Supported by mass media campaigns, these actions project an image of Muslims as enemies and contribute to the growth of xenophobic sentiment. We are observing an increase in vandalism against Muslim sites. The unlawful persecution of religious organizations deemed extremists continues. Jehovah's Witnesses face the most severe persecution among these groups. As of early October 2025, 160 believers were incarcerated in penal colonies and pretrial detention centers. Our recommendations will be presented in the conference public database. Please get acquainted with them. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on my list is the delegation of the Czech Republic. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Yuri Kalashnikov. I am from Human Rights Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Czechia aligns itself with the EU statement. Speaking on my national capacity, let me first of all thank the introducers for their very valuable and inspiring remarks. Support for civil society and promotion of human rights are traditional Czech priorities. Czechia is a regular contributor to the European Endowment for Democracy, Prague Civil Society Center, and other relevant organizations that support human rights defenders. We continue funding civil society and human rights defenders through the Transition Promotion Program and paying particular attention to individual cases which we mention in the human rights fora. As an example of the best practice, we can share the residence facilitation program called, quote-unquote, civil society, which our government implements in close partnership with NGOs. Its aim is to provide safe refuge to the endangered human rights defenders and journalists. In times as turbulent as ours, when human rights and their defenders are increasingly under attack, the work of the media is essential to ensure that the human rights defenders' voices reach the capitals. In this context, we continue to call for the release of all imprisoned human rights defenders and journalists. We especially highlight the cases of Georgian journalist Mzia Amaglobeli and Russian journalist Olga Komleva, whose severe prison sentences exemplify the risks faced by those who report on human rights violation. Finally, in the framework of this plenary session, we would also like to inform you that Czechia established, I would say finally, the National Human Rights Institution on the 1st of July 2025. The amendment to the Act on the Public Defender of Rights establishes the National Human Rights Institution and Institution of Children Ombudsman within the Office of the Public Defender of Rights. By establishing this institution, Czechia has fulfilled the 1990 Copenhagen Commitment, in which OSCE participating states committed themselves to, I quote, facilitate the establishment and strengthening of independent national institutions in the field of human rights and the rule of law. Thank you very much.
And thank you. The next delegation on my list is the delegation of France. You have the floor. Thank you.
Dear moderator, distinguished participants, international human rights law is our common heritage, and only its respect guarantees us the same fundamental rights. The violation of human rights is a betrayal of our humanity. Wherever they occur, France continues to denounce violations, call for respect for international law, supports international solidarity, and the fights against impunity. France supports civil society and welcomes human rights defenders. As part of the Marianne Initiative launched at the end of 2021 by the President of the Republic, France welcomes human rights defenders for 6 months each year when they are under threat, so that they can benefit from training and develop their network. 60 human rights defenders have now been welcomed, and we keep on supporting their projects as they leave France. Their selection is based on the recognition of their remarkable commitment to causes as diverse as women's rights, environmental protection, civil and political freedoms, and media freedom. France also has several independent national human rights institutions, the first of which is the National Consultative Commission on Human Rights for the protection and promotion of human rights in France. This independent administrative authority provides advice and proposal to the government and parliament, law and humanitarian action, and monitors France's compliance with its international commitment. France's Defender of Rights is also an independent administrative authority in charge of ensuring the respect for the freedoms and rights of citizens and fighting against discrimination. Finally, France's constitution states that the judicial authority is the guardian of fundamental freedoms. In the French system, a specific judge of liberties and detention rules on these points. Respect for human rights, individual rights and freedoms, and the duty of accountability remain a priority for France, both nationally and internationally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on my list is number 25, the International Eurasia Press Fund. Thank you.
Actually, it's not working. Okay. I'm Evgenia Hajiyeva, International Eurasian Press Fund. Dear friends, human rights defenders play a critical role on promoting human dignity, advancing justice, and ensure accountability. Yet around the world, they continue to face significant challenges, including judicial harassment, intimidation, and violence. A vibrant civil society is indispensable for the promotion and protection of human rights. In Azerbaijan, civil society actors, including NGOs, unions, media, cultural practitioners, and religious communities, serve both key contributors and trusted partners in strengthening their local human rights protection system. Over the years, sustainable efforts have been made to enhance national protection mechanism. We already possess a strong legal and institutional human rights framework. However, more targeted investment, comprehensive policy measure, and inclusive partnership are needed to strengthen local protection ecosystem, network, and mechanism. These efforts are essential to achieving tangible change on the ground. We must also shift the narrative to better highlight the value of open society, where human rights are protected and where dialogue and diversity are embraced. In time of crisis, that the need most open and respectful dialogue, grounded firmly in the principle of human rights. Human rights defenders are the pillar of such dialogue and of human rights work in my country. We must do everything within our power to ensure they can operate freely and safely wherever they are. Because the journey towards a world where all individuals are equal in rights and dignity is far from over. At the same time, we cannot ignore emerging challenges. In some contexts, the space for civil society has been misused for purpose for removed from genuine human rights work, including to spread of disinformation, radicalization, and the pursuit of external political agendas under the guise of human rights advocacy. This trend, also associated with the specific region, especially post-Soviet regions, country, is increasingly become a global concern. Nonetheless, the rights to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association, and religion of fundamental freedoms inside in international human rights law and the Constitution of Republic of Azerbaijan and our national legislation. Everyone has a right to freedom to opinion and expression, including the right to hold opinions without interference, and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas across in the media and across border. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on the list is the delegation of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. At the outset, Ukraine thanks the organizers and today's speakers for focusing on the freedoms that animate our human dimension, to assemble and associate, to defend rights, to believe and to dissent, and to rely on independent national human rights institutions. These are not theoretical questions for Ukraine. They are tested every day by the Russian Federation's ongoing war of aggression. In temporarily occupied parts of Ukraine, assemblies do not exist in any meaningful sense. Public space is militarized, spontaneous gatherings are dispersed, rallies are staged for propaganda under the eye of the occupier. Independent associations are shut down or forcibly re-registered under the foreign law. Volunteer networks are criminalized as extremists. Across the contact line inside the Russian Federation, ordinary people receive sentences for a banner, a flower at memorial, or a post on a social media. These are not isolated excesses, they are the mechanics of silence in the society. Ukrainian human rights defenders, lawyers, journalists, community organizers, documenters continue their work under shell in occupation and in exile. Many have been abducted, tortured, persecuted in the closed hearings or transferred deep into the Russian Federation. The picture is consistent. Civic actors are targeted precisely because they stand between raw power and the individual. Ukraine is grateful to our dear UN mechanism and partner CSOs that help protect them, including through relocation, legal aid, and evidence preservation. Ukraine's ombudsperson and specialized prevention mechanism operate under wartime conditions, documenting violation, tracing the disappeared, and advocating for detainees and deported children. We ask partners to deepen cooperation with our NHRI and to deny any legitimacy to structures installed by the occupying power. In temporarily occupied areas, religious communities of Orthodox Church of Ukraine and other denominations that are not connected with the Russian Orthodox Church face searches, asset seizures, intimidation of clergy and believers, and prosecutions dressed up as a security. Places of worship are damaged or repurposed. Catechism becomes extremism. Chaplaincy becomes spying. The aim is not theology, it is control of identity, language, and consciousness. Our requests are concrete and within OEC commitments. Hold a strict line of non-recognition towards the legal outcomes manufactured by occupation authorities. Expand protection programs for human rights defenders and journalists at risk. Resource cooperation with Ukraine ombudsperson and civil society on tracing, documentation, and redress, including for deported and forcibly transferred persons. Keep this violation visible in every OEC forum until access is granted, the prosecution are freed, and the rights we discuss here can be exercised without fear. I thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is number 27, ENRI, the European Network of National Human Rights Institutions. You have the floor.
Thank you, dear moderator, distinguished delegates. My name is Paula Nowak. I represent the European Network of National Human Rights Institutions, ENRI. It is a privilege to address you today to bring to your attention the crucial role national human rights institutions, NHRIs, play in ensuring effective human rights protection across the OSCE region. As independent state-mandated bodies established to promote and protect human rights, NHRIs are human rights defenders, and they serve as essential partners to governments in identifying systemic human rights issues. They offer expertise and advice on how to prevent them and address them when they arise. NHRIs provide a credible, rights-based perspective that helps states uphold their international human rights commitments. Yet, through ENRI's annual rule of law reports, which present information submitted by NHRIs from all European countries, we know that NHRIs across Europe are facing increasing challenges that impact their effectiveness. These include insufficient and inadequate resources, also in view of increasing mandates and budget cuts, a lack of effective, timely and reasoned follow-up to their recommendations by state authorities, a rising number of intimidation, attacks, threats, with 1 in 4 European NHRIs reporting them in relation to past year. In today's side event that dedicated to strong and resilient NHRIs that ENRI co-organized together with ODIHR, we heard about these challenges and others that NHRI experience. Supporting NHRIs is not only a matter of fulfilling international commitments made by states, it is also a matter of investing in strong and meaningful engagement with key actors to safeguard democracy, human rights, and the rule of law across the OSCE region. Strong NHRIs make states stronger. I urge all participating states to take necessary steps to ensure that the NHRIs in your countries operate independently with sufficient resources and safeguards in place to protect them from attacks and threats. It is also vital that their recommendations and advice are duly considered and addressed by relevant authorities. This will benefit both the state and civil society overall. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you. The next speaker on my list is 28, Queer KZ Initiative. You have the floor.
Dear colleagues, Your Excellencies, my name is Timirlan Baymash, and I'm co-founder of a human rights initiative called Queer KZ in Kazakhstan. I speak today not because I want to, but because I have to. While other young people my age plan their future, I am forced to fight for the simple right to exist. My friends and I live under constant attack, targeted with hate, harassed by authorities and media for nothing more than being ourselves. Equality is not an obligation that it's an obligation that every state, including Kazakhstan, has sworn to uphold. Yet in my country, life is treated as a threat, and independent human rights defenders are treated as enemies of the state. In Kazakhstan, peaceful assemblies and association of freedom exist only on paper. We have to receive humiliating permission from the local government to organize peaceful gathering. LGBTQ organizations are being denied registration. Public events are banned, raided, or violently dispersed. Human rights defenders and activists are interrogated, tortured, and threatened simply for gathering in solidarity. Journalists and human rights defenders that report Kazakhstan's support of Russia's war in Ukraine are persecuted. There is still no national human rights institution that recognizes or protects LGBTQ people. Instead, the president negatively portrays LGBTQ people, and the government promotes a fabricated anti-LGBT propaganda law, a narrative even supported by pseudo-research through gongos to justify repression. This campaign of disinformation is not for the protection, but against. It's against, and it's deliberate act and strategy to raise us and to legitimize violence. These actions stand in direct violation of Kazakhstan obligations. Despite fear, burnout, and isolation, human rights defenders in Kazakhstan continue their work, unpaid and unprotected and unseen. Our demands are not radical, but bare minimum of civilized nations. They are bare minimum of human decency. Kazakhstan must recognize LGBTQ organizations, protect them from hate-driven violence and persecution, include our voices in national human rights dialogue, stop the development of not transparent law about NGOs that target independent organizations and shrink civic space. Moreover, Ombudsman institution must be independent and separate. Freedom of association is heartbeat of justice, and Kazakhstan's future will be measured not by its promises, but by how it treats those who dare to speak for equality and human consciousness. Thank you.
And thank you. The next speaker on my list is 29, the delegation of Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Turkey is committed to the OSCE norms regarding the freedom of assembly and association, as well as freedom of thought, conscience, religion, and belief. We also underscore the important role of civil society in promoting peace, security, democratic resilience across the OSCE region and beyond. Our constitutional system is based on the equality of all individuals without discrimination, guaranteeing equality before law, irrespective of language, color, gender, political opinion, belief, religion, or any such considerations. Civil society is an integral part of Turkish democracy. With this vibrant civil society, all the segments of the society find room to raise their concerns and expectations in Turkey. Representatives of civil society are also actively involved in the comprehensive reform process carried out in Turkey, aiming at strengthening democracy, promoting respect for human rights, and consolidating the rule of law. However, there have been recently many cases where the freedom of expression has been misused or abused, and terrorist organizations could find room under the guise of civil society organizations. In this regard, it is disappointing to see that despite our timely and duly objections, we see that members of the FETÖ terrorist organization could abuse this platform to raise some false allegations against Turkey. At the outset, allow me to reiterate and clarify that the so-called Gülen movement is not an innocent civil movement. It is a designated terrorist organization. This terrorist organization that orchestrated the treacherous coup attempt in 2016 targeted democracy and all state institutions of Turkey, as well as its citizens. On that fateful night, 250 innocent people were killed and more than 2,000 were injured. That night, Turkish people stood against this heinous coup attempt in unity. This new generation terrorist organization continues to pose a threat to integrity of the Turkish state and democracy. It also threatens the democratic values and moral principles of the countries in which it is active. Such malign approach does not have any relevance with freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief. The so-called members of this terrorist organization continue to hijack international platforms like this one, disseminating misinformation under the guise of defending freedom of expression and freedom of media. Any statements that will legitimize this terrorist organization's propaganda should be avoided in any platform. The collective fight against terrorism in its all forms and manifestations is indispensable for the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. With this understanding, we expect all participating states to support our counter-terrorism efforts in solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to the next speaker, which is the delegation of Armenia.
Thank you. Mr. Moderator, the rights to freedom of peaceful assembly and association are cornerstones of any democratic society. They empower individuals to express their views, advocate for change, and unite around shared causes. These freedoms are enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and form the basis of our OSCE commitments. Yet we cannot ignore the troubling reality that the erosion of these fundamental rights is becoming alarmingly normalized across parts of the OSCE area of responsibility. Authoritarian practices, including restrictive legislation, arbitrary detentions, and excessive use of force against peaceful protesters, continue to weaken independent civil society and silence dissenting voices. Too often, the rhetoric of security and public order is strategically weaponized to justify clear violations of human rights. These restrictions not only fragment our human rights protections, but also undermine the OSCE vision of comprehensive and indivisible security. Experience shows that domestic repression and external aggression go hand in hand, threatening regional peace and stability. As civic space continue to shrink, we must recall that the rights to peaceful assembly, expression and association remain fundamental to open societies. Any restrictions on these freedoms must be based on legitimate grounds and strictly adhere to the principles of legality, necessity and proportionality. Armenia is determined to work collectively towards safeguarding these essential freedoms. Armenia reaffirmed its unwavering commitment to the protection of peaceful assembly and association as essential pillars of democracy and human rights. Important steps have been taken domestically, including comprehensive police reforms. Our new law on police guard aligns with international standards, strengthening legal safeguards and ensuring that law enforcement upholds human rights in the context of peaceful protests. Equally, Armenia attaches great importance to the freedom of thoughts, conscience, religion and belief. These freedoms are prerequisites for inclusive and just societies and essential for building cultures of peace and tolerance between peoples and states. Armenia's legislation and government policies are fully aligned with relevant international instruments, ensuring the prevention of discrimination and the complete enjoyment of these rights. In conclusion, there is an urgent need for renewed commitment to safeguarding fundamental freedoms. The OSCE and its participating states must strengthen legal protections, foster safe and enabling environments for civic engagement, and ensure accountability for violations. Armenia stands ready to work with all partners to advance this shared responsibility. I thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on my list is 31, Set My People Free. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And my name is Kamal Fahmi, and I am speaking in behalf of Set My People Free. Set My People Free is working to abolish apostasy and blasphemy law in Islam, as there is 11 countries which have death sentence, and about 15 countries people does not have the freedom to leave Islam. They face torture and imprisonment. Our fear is these laws are sneaking into Europe and taking away the freedom of thought, conscience, and belief. The number of victims of apostasy and blasphemy law are increasing, and this is a problem. And mainly, people are not able to speak out against it. It is like honor killing. In Bavaria, May 2017, a convert to Christianity was killed. She was serving in a church. Also, you have Simone Paty was just killed in 2020, and this goes on. Later, you can come to our side event. It is going to be at 14:20. You will get more information. It is upstairs in Kolesvik room. And the thing is that Europe, for us, coming from the Middle East, and this country was a place we breathe. There is freedom, freedom of thought, conscience, and belief. And this is very crucial for the existence of democracy. The problem we have now, we started to have policies for hate speech, policies for Islamophobia, but we have to realize Article 18 is not really protection for the religion. It is protection for everyone, for the individual, from the abuse of religion. So actually, when you protect the freedom of everyone, you are protecting everyone. But you don't protect an ideology or a religion. Because if you are fair to everyone, you are fair to all people. And so it is very important to realize that Article 18 and 19 are not to protect ideologies or beliefs, because there is freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, and freedom of belief, and we have to have the freedom to change, and also to question, to criticize, because there is no ideology which is perfect. And I would like to end with saying that we need to emphasize that these freedoms are for the individual, not for the community, because some cultures need to change. And then at the end, I just say, therefore, treat the same way you want them to treat you. This is the way we should behave. For this is the law and the prophet. And then it is important that if you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does not
I'd ask you to please conclude your remarks now. Thank you.
Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on my list is Human Rights Consulting Group Public Foundation.
Спасибо, господин модератор.
Thank you very much, dear delegates, conference participants. I'm the director of the Human Rights Consulting Group. Starting this fall, we joined a thematic group on digital transfer and transformation of Central Asia with the European Union. Also, I'm a co-founder of initiative request in Astana, Kazakhstan. Digitalization in our country has become not only the way to develop, but they also use it as a way to influence fundamental rights and freedoms. Technology should increase the participation, but nevertheless they're used to control how the legislation is used in a selective way. For example, they introduced facial recognition systems. Web sites can be blocked without judicial decisions. The content is being filtered and harmful information is blocked. There's no judicial control, no transparent procedure. Anyway, it's used to silence any censorship against the government, especially when someone covers protests or elections. They're drafting the law on AI currently. Without the participation of the civil society, the new law may actually increase the censorship. They're planning to adopt it in December. The transparency of algorithms should be provided. People should be involved in digital governance. We appeal to the OSCE countries to actually evaluate the impact of digital legislation on rights and freedoms and introduce a dialogue human rights by design in the technology area. Technology should improve transparency because today control of data means control over democracy.
The next speaker is the ALLATRA International Public Movement. You have the floor. Thank you.
Hello and good afternoon. I represent the international ALLATRA movement. Our organization investigates the climate change and environmental protection problems and human rights. But in the process, we ourselves have faced brutal violation of rights. Former volunteers of our organization are persecuted, humiliated, tortured, and imprisoned in the Russian Federation. Who is behind the persecution of those human rights defenders? Well, there is a transnational anti-cultural network working as the so-called fight against dangerous cults. This is a rhetoric that covers serious violations and serious crimes violating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which guarantees freedom of belief and religion everywhere. So such groups are being accused of pedophilia and child trafficking, exploitation of vulnerable people through forced rehabilitation centers. But this is just part of the problem. This network is actively becoming part of governmental structures, corrupting prosecutors and officials, formulating false expert opinions and undermining democratic institutions. In Washington in May earlier this year, it was remarked that transnational anti-cultural networks coordinated by Moscow are a threat to democracy. The question of the Russian razzias connected with FSB was raised on a number of occasions. What began as a discreditation of minorities is today turning into a violation of freedom and the growth of totalitarian tendency. If we do not judge the activities of this network, then the democracy might soon be left close to nil in Europe, and there will be no real freedom. The activities of this network should be stopped also at the legal level. More details about the methods of working of these structures we will tell you on our side event at 4 p.m. and we invite everyone to join us. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Association of Religious Organizations of Kazakhstan, AROC. You have the floor.
Меня зовут Светлана Буглова.
My name is Svetlana Buglova. I'm an expert at AROC. Freedom of religion or belief remains one of the priority areas in ensuring human rights in Kazakhstan. Despite positive dynamics in state denominational relations and interfaith dialogue, certain provisions of national legislation create obstacles to the full realization of this right. In Kazakhstan, the individual right to freedom of religion or belief in practice depends on whether a religious association is officially registered. If this association is not registered, its members are deprived of the legal ability to hold worship services, perform religious practices, or distribute religious literature. As a result, the exercise of the individual right to freedom of religion or belief is directly dependent on the legal status of an organization, which contradicts the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights ratified by Kazakhstan. The main problem lies in the excessive registration requirements for religious associations established by the Law on Religious Activity and Religious Associations 2011. You need to have at least 50 citizens of the Republic of Kazakhstan to sign the application, which poses serious difficulties for communities in small settlements. According to Article 11 of the Law on the Republic of Kazakhstan on state registration of legal entities and record registration of branches and representative offices, citizens who are debtors under the enforcement documents cannot act as founders. This provision contradicts paragraph 2 of Article 15 of the Law on Non-Profit Organizations. Thus, the creation of a religious association depends on the personal financial situation of citizens, creating unjustified barriers to exercise the right of freedom of religion or belief. If at least one of the 50 founding citizens has debts under an enforcement document, the rest of them are deprived of the ability to exercise the individual right to freedom of religion or belief. In law enforcement practices, these restrictions often lead to refusals of registration on formal grounds. For example, it is not possible for a founding citizen to answer a phone call to confirm personal data and consent to register the religious association. Many face red tape, other bureaucratic restrictions which violates the freedom of religion or belief. In this regard, we propose the following recommendations: bring legislation on religious activity in line with ICCPR, introduce voluntary notification and registration for registration associations, and reduce the minimum number of founding citizens required to create a legal entity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on the list is number 35, NGO RNL. You have the floor.
Hello, dear participants of the conference. I represent Karakalpak people, those people who are in the minority in their own land. This is not a demographic incident. This is the result of well-thought politics when indigenous people have become a statistical shadow. Currently, we cannot register no independent organizations, no human rights activists can work in a legal way. But at the international forums, those who serve the government and not to people speak instead of us, as in the theater. They distribute the roles and act in line with the scenario. An example, a Karakalpak chapter. Pay attention. Karakalpak chapter, Association for Support of Children and Women of Uzbekistan, a very noble name. But this is Gongo. This is a facade imitating the voice of the people. This is the Potemkin village. And they do it in order to show the world the facade behind which people are silent in fear. Yesterday, participant number 22 spoke, Mrs. Miradilova. For 10 times, she tried to pronounce the word Karakalpakstan correctly, but she couldn't do it in the end. But she spoke a lot about taking care of Karakalpaki women, but basically it is very cynical when actually at home the people are proclaimed terrorists and enemies.
Or refer to other members in a way that might be aggressive or intimidating. Thank you.
My people actually survived the July events of 2022. Martial law was introduced. People were shot, kept in fear. Afterwards, anything is persecuted, any prayer, any word. The government is informed about it. Regular people who fled, very common people, they ask, why cannot we protect our family abroad? They were not given actually international protection. That's why they're asking. I appeal to the international community. Listen to the voices of people, those who speak on behalf of freedom and conscience. And the only honest word about Karakalpakstan should not be taken from the paper report, but from the heart of Karakalpaki people who still believe in justice.
Thank you. Next speaker on the list is number 36, Stop Army Movement. You have the floor.
Добрый день, уважаемые председатели.
Hello and good afternoon, Mr. Moderator, delegations and colleagues. I am a lawyer. This is a Russian organization, and we have been helping the objectors since 2013. We help men to refuse to take part in the ongoing war, legal and illegal ways, because we know that there are no legal ways of objecting the participation of participating in the war. Ms. Katarova noticed a tendency where that is used by the Russian authorities to complete the army ranks. For instance, the forced military service and forced military contracts. There is either convincing them, saying that apparently signing a contract is better than the mandatory military service. There's also threatening. If somebody refuses to sign a contract, then they might be sent to the front line. And sometimes people are just simply being told that the contract has been unnecessary, and they're just being sent to the front lines, or their signatures might be falsified. In 23, we saw first cases in refugee cases or asylum cases, and we saw Finland had 134 people being deported, and including military objectors who were filing for asylum when the mobilization in Russia started in 2022. So the argument was that the regular military service for a short term might not be a foundation for applying for asylum, but in fact the Russian Federation uses the compulsory military service as a way to complete the ranks of its army. Russia uses prisoners and foreigners and also men who have to undergo compulsory military service, and this is probably the most vulnerable social group at the moment. And in this connection, we would like to formulate some recommendations. There are people who are just simply living in European countries, and in Estonia, there are people who are living there. Then they're required to produce some certificates that they have never served in the Russian army, and this kind of certificate is never to be obtained. And we call upon OSCE countries not to multiply the objections for those Russian citizens to stay in their countries legally. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker on my list is Bar Karor Hayot, Sustainable Life. You have the floor.
Yeah. Thank you, distinguished moderator. I'm Serikbek Muratayev. I'm representing Bar Karor Hayot NGO from Uzbekistan. Distinguished conference participants, ladies and gentlemen, the development of national human rights institutions and the promotion of freedom of thought and conscience are fundamental elements of a democratic state and a sustainable society. These values are particularly important in multinational countries, home to representatives of different peoples, cultures, and religions. In this context, the Republic of Karakalpakstan deserves special attention, a region that has long been an example of peaceful coexistence, interethnic harmony, and constructive dialogue between the state and society. All key human rights institutions in the country are active in the region. The Regional Office of the Human Rights Commissioner, Ombudsman, public reception of offices of the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan in all these districts in Karakalpakstan. The National Human Rights Center and its partner organizations, women's councils, youth organizations, and Mahalla self-government bodies, which ensure practical citizen participation in decision-making. These institutions operate not just on paper, but in real life. They receive thousands of requests, conduct monitoring, facilitate the restoration of violated rights, and organize legal education and training programs. In recent years alone, hundreds of mobile citizen consultations have been held, especially in remote areas where access to legal assistance was previously limited. This demonstrates that state policy in Karakalpakstan is based on the principle of not leaving a single request unanswered. Karakalpakstan has traditionally been distinguished by its tolerance and respect for diversity of beliefs. Religious organizations of various paths operate in the region, and the right of every citizen of freely practice their religion or to profess no religion is guaranteed. Unfortunately, statements are sometimes made that distort the reality, as if the residents of Karakalpakstan are disadvantaged or deprived of their rights. Mr. Burhanov has rightly pointed out that the allegation of alleged infringement of Karakalpak's rights by Nurmetova, Toremuratov, and Bekmuradov are untrue and have no factual basis. Karakalpakstan's greatest asset is its people, open, hardworking, peace-loving, preserving a rich cultural heritage and living in a spirit of respect and good neighborhoodness. Not the liars and traitors who emigrated decades ago and have no connection to my homeland. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. We turn to our next speaker, which is the European Centre for Law and Justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Thibaut van den Bosch, and I represent the European Centre for Law and Justice. Christians in Turkey of all denominations live in a hostile climate. Political, media, and social narratives frequently portray Christians as foreign, suspect, or destabilizing. In short, as a threat to national security. Such rhetoric fuels direct violence, including attacks on churches and cemeteries and intimidation of clergy and believers. Protestants and Christian converts from Islam form an especially vulnerable and closely monitored group. They also suffer from entry bans on foreign Christians. Between 2019 and 2024, 132 foreign Christians were arbitrarily expelled, affecting a total of 303 persons, including spouses and children. The denial of the Armenian genocide continues to shape public discourse and adds stigma to ancient Christian communities. In the public education system, a religious identity aligned with Sunni Islam and Turkish nationalism is promoted, which leads to the marginalization of Christians, Alevis, and other non-Muslim groups. In Turkey, many Christian communities still lack freedom of association and related rights, such as the legal ability to exist in law and to operate openly. For the Protestant community, the main challenge is places of worship. Lacking historic church buildings, most congregations rent or purchase ordinary premises. Yet many are not officially recognized as churches and face pressure. For traditional churches, especially Greek Orthodox and Armenian, the state systematically interferes in the operation of community foundations inherited from the Ottoman period. The right to property and the freedom to hold free elections for foundation boards have been restricted for decades, contrary to the requirements of legality, legitimate aim, and necessity in a democratic society. As a result, Christian foundations have been expropriated, micromanaged, or frozen, and in effect, nationalized, even while they run schools and hospitals that serve the common good. At the European Centre for Law and Justice, we advocate before European and international bodies. For example, we intervene in the Mavrakis case before the European Court of Human Rights to defend true priests who were removed from foundation boards simply because they are clergy. We therefore urge Turkey to recognize the legal personality of Christian communities and associations, protect the property rights, guarantee free regular elections for Christian foundation boards, and fully implement the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on the list is the Almaty City Bar Association.
Следующий выступающий. Hello, I represent Kazakhstani lawyers, and I would like to tell you about the situation in Kazakhstan, and I also defend around 5 citizens of Russian Federation who have applied for asylum in Kazakhstan, but these issues have not been positively reviewed. They have received rejection. But today I'd like to tell you not about Russian nationals, but my colleagues, lawyers, who have been intensively persecuted by the Kazakhstan authorities, even though Kazakhstan lawyers have raised these issues on multiple occasions in OSCE meetings. Back in 2021, President addressed members of parliament with a call to strengthen the role of the bar in the state and to ensure equality between lawyers and prosecutors in judicial proceedings. However, all these statements remain merely words with no real implementation. As a tool of pressure against lawyers to suppress their professional defense activities and remove them from cases, criminal proceedings have been initiated under pretense of Article 423 against Shanna Razbakova, Gulbahid Bizhanova, and Dinara Zhubatova. All cases were later dismissed due to lack of corpus delicti. In the case of Dinara Zhubatova, simultaneous administrative case was also initiated, and my colleague Marjan Doskorayev was also brought a case against for disclosing allegedly information about the health and condition of his client. All these provisions of the criminal and administrative code and along with procedural mechanisms are being used against lawyers who report violations encountered during investigations or act in defense of their clients. And it is evident that these legal tools will continue to be used for repressive purposes against the legal profession. And these facts directly violate the UN Basic Principles on the role of lawyers 1990, according to which the state must ensure that lawyers are not subjected to persecution or threats in connection with the lawful performance of their professional duties. In this regard, I will appeal to OSCE to include this statement in its report and develop recommendations addressed to Kazakhstan regarding the need to eliminate any mechanisms allowing the persecution of lawyers from national legislation while lawyers are performing their professional duties, and introduce a procedure requiring the consent of the Bar Association before initiating any proceedings against a lawyer to ensure additional safeguards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is the local religious association Satpayev Pentecostal Church of Agape. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sergei Samokhvalov. I'm the representative of the clergy, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the religious publication newspaper in central Kazakhstan. I would like to draw attention to two interrelated challenges in the law enforcement practice of Kazakhstan's law on religious activity and religious associations. First, mandatory theological examination of religious materials, and second, restrictions on the distribution of religious literature. According to Article 6 of the Law of the Republic of Kazakhstan on religious activity and religious associations, all religious literature, audio and video materials, as well as religious items are subject to mandatory state religious expert opinion before they can be distributed. Article 9 of this law limits the places where religious literature may be disseminated, exclusively limited to places of worship and specialized shops registered with religious associations. In practice, this results in administrative delays in the distribution of spiritual materials, restricted access of believers to religious content, and de facto limitation to the freedom to express religious beliefs guaranteed by Article 22 of the Constitution of the Republic of Kazakhstan. It means non-compliance with international standards, including Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the OSCE Copenhagen Document 1990, and the ODIHR Guidelines on the Legal Personality of Religious or Belief Communities. These documents emphasize that any restrictions on freedom of religion or belief are permissible only to protect public safety, health, morals, or the rights of others, and cannot be used as a mechanism of general control. In order to harmonize Kazakhstan's legislation with international norms and OSCE standards in particular, I propose the following. Introduce a notification-based procedure for the registration and dissemination of religious literature instead of the authorization approach. Limit the requirement of religious expertise only to cases where there are reasonable grounds to suspect incitement to violence, extremism, or discrimination. Establish an independent public academic council representing civic society, among others. Remove territorial restrictions on the distribution of religious materials, ensuring citizens free access to spiritual literature through publicly available channels. We believe that Kazakhstan, as the member of the OSCE under international law, can demonstrate balance between safety, freedom of conscience, belief, and religion, and will represent best practice in the Central Asian region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the registered speakers we have on the list. But before we turn to the reserves, I would also like to go back to hear from the Dayanch Civil Movement Platform, which was earlier on our list but not present. So if you would like to take the floor now, I will pass to you. So you have the floor. Thank you.
Здравствуйте, спасибо большое.
Hello, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, today I would like to speak about the issue that is not spoken about often. Turkmen human rights organizations abroad are not independent. They became the tool for pressure. The assistance to human rights activists is provided selectively, only to those who are in line with the official requirements. Those who do not listen, they actually left by themselves without legal aid. So human rights activism becomes a tool of control. Human rights activists live under fear. My colleagues from the platform Diane's every day risk their freedom. For example, Diana is mother of 2 children. She lives without documents and financial means, but she continues protecting others. So those who help others, they are defenseless themselves. I think UNHCR work should be taken into account. For example, in Turkey, in the office, they employ nationals of the countries from which people flee, and that's why quite often people are rejected. I think UNHCR should not employ people of interested parties. Those positions should be taken by independent international experts. Also, Turkmeni human rights organizations abroad should be monitored carefully. For example, how they use their grants, because many activists are not provided with any aid, although the money has been provided to those organizations. Recently, USA rejected a sponsorship, so it's interesting to understand where the money aimed at people of Turkmenistan is spent. No one should get rich using the money originally aimed for human rights activists. A temporary center with UNHCR should be established in order to provide temporary refuge to people who had to flee their country. Nationals of the countries from which people have fled should not be employed by international agencies such as UNHCR, should not have impact on how the case of a person is being processed. Today, those who defend others are defenseless themselves. Human rights activism is being politicized, and that's why it undermines the trust of people. Human rights activism means human dignity. It's not a policy, it's not business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll turn to the reserve list now. I think we'll have space for around 5 or 6 speakers before I turn back to our panel for concluding remarks and reflections. So I can turn now to the first on the reserve list, which is the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be with you in Warsaw today at Europe's largest platform for dialogue and democracy and human rights. My name is Kyriakos Hatzigiannis. I am the Vice President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, a member of the House of Representatives in Cyprus. The right to freedom of thought, conscience, religion, and belief is both foundational and increasingly under threat. These rights are firmly enshrined in OSCE political commitments, such as the Helsinki Final Act and the OSCE Copenhagen document, which guide participating states' actions. It is also recognized within the broader international human rights framework, beginning with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a foundational standard and legally protected under binding treaties. In the OSCE Copenhagen document 1990, participating states committed to ensuring the right to believe or not believe, protecting the right to change religion or belief, and guaranteeing the freedom to practice religion publicly or privately, alone or in community, and free of coercion. Let me also underscore additional OSCE guidelines, such as the Vienna Document 1989, which require states to combat intolerance and protect the rights of religious communities, and the Toledo Guidelines 2007, which promote respectful teaching about religions in public education. Yet, despite binding obligations, the OSCE commitments, we are witnessing a rise in discrimination, hate crimes and violence, targeting individuals and communities because of their faith or beliefs. They are not isolated incidents, but reflect a deeper erosion of tolerance and a dangerous climate of fear in our region. A very recent and tragic reminder is a terrorist attack on a synagogue in Manchester where worshippers were injured and killed. We know that when freedom of religion is undermined, it threatens not only individuals' dignity, but also the health and cohesion of our democratic societies. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly remains committed to confronting these challenges. In 2025 Porto Declaration, our Assembly expressed concern over ongoing discrimination, systemic inequalities, and insufficient protection experienced by minority groups, including those based on religion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Human Rights Commissioner in the Republic of Kazakhstan.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in Kazakhstan, people do not need permission to hold a peaceful assembly. It's enough to simply notify the local authorities and to make the process more transparent and fair. This can even be done online. There are only a few clear and objective grounds for refusal. For example, if another public event is already planned at the same time and place, if there are construction works, if deadlines for notifications are missed, or if a chosen location cannot safely accommodate the number of participants. International law also allows restrictions when it's necessary to protect public safety or the rights of others. In January 2025, the Constitutional Court issued a very important decision. If local authorities refuse a request for valid reasons, they must offer organizers an alternative option, a different place, time, or route. And this is not just on paper. This year alone, in 55 cases, organizers were offered alternative arrangements, and their assemblies went ahead peacefully. Our courts have gradually started to recognize as unlawful refusals by local authorities to allow peaceful assemblies when no alternative options are offered. Since 2023, the process of establishing NGO has been significantly simplified. Now, only 3 founders are required to create an NGO instead of 10 previously. Currently, more than 23,000 NGOs are officially registered across the country. At the initiative of our President, a draft law is now being prepared to further enhance the legal framework for NGO activities. This work is being carried out in line with international standards, including OSCE principles. The Constitution of Kazakhstan guarantees everyone the right to freedom or thought, conscience, and religion. This includes the freedom to practice any religion or not to practice one at all, to choose or change one's faith, and to conduct religious rites and ceremonies in accordance with the law. Religions are not divided into major and minor. No religion is recognized as state or mandatory. In practice, this principle is clearly reflected in the country's religious landscape. Around 4,000 religious associations representing 18 different confessions coexist peacefully. At the international level, Kazakhstan has become a platform for interfaith dialogue, hosting the Congress of Leaders of the World and Traditional Religions. The most recent Congress in 2025 brought together more than 100 delegations from 60 countries. The state's policy is based on tolerance and interfaith dialogue, which has earned broad support in the international arena. The registration process for religious associations in Kazakhstan is uniform, transparent, and fully consistent with international standards. Same approach applies to the ban on face covering clothing. This measure is not about religion stigmatization. Its purpose is public safety and the protection of the rights of others. For example, identification during investigation or across to services. Similar regulation exists in a number of countries, including France, Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, Austria, and Switzerland. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is the Azerbaijani community in Poland.
Thank you. Уважаемые коллеги, меня зовут...
Dear colleagues, I represent Azerbaijani community in Poland. Freedom of thought, belief is not just beautiful words. This is a real test. what is the attitude of the state towards who is different from the majority. Azerbaijan has been undergoing this test for many centuries. In our country, Christians, Muslims, and other denominations live in peace. We have mosques, synagogues, churches. They are situated next to each other as an expression of our culture and attitude towards our people. Our constitution stipulates the freedom of religion and conscience. This is the reality that we can witness in every part of the city. But not every country can boast of the same things in the region. I would like to remember that Armenia expelled several 100,000 Azerbaijani people from its territory only because of their ethnic belongings. The mosques were turned into stables. Is it the expression of freedom of belief and respect to beliefs of other people? These are documented violations of the principles that we are discussing today at the OSCE platform. Nevertheless, Armenian delegation tried to portray Azerbaijan as a country which is not tolerant. Azerbaijan never persecuted anyone because of their beliefs on national background, even during conflict situations. When Armenians residing in Nagorno-Karabakh decided to leave safely the region, they all were provided with equal rights. This is the real freedom of conscience when we respect the desire of other people live next to us. So we are an example of peaceful coexistence. We do not only talk about tolerance, we live in line with its principles. Our country flag protects all ethnic minorities, all religions. I appeal to everyone, including Armenia, stop talking and start acting.
The next speaker is the National Alliance of Professional Social Workers.
Good day for everyone, dear chair, dear audience. Thank you very much for possibility to be here. I'm first time here and I'm the head of National Alliance of Professional Social Workers. My name is Dinara. I got PhD in social work 15 years ago. And it's a big honor for me to do the second 5-year mandate as a head of national NGO. And even we be able yesterday to do side event human trafficking via professional social work lens with a member of parliament of my country and with connection with OSCE office. And the second message that it's reality that it's possible to initiate this NGO, because it was my idea to be establisher of NGO and to lead this NGO and to provide empowerment for females, because in our board, 95% it's a female woman, and social workers we are promoting social work image and prestige of profession in country. It's totally 95% of women. What it means that it's possible to raise women leadership through realization of social and economical rights as a human dimension basket. And another message that it's our scope of our mandate in country to put investments to make a harmony with international law and the country level law to promote social work as a tool of a democratization process and tool to prevent child trafficking, to prevent human trafficking, to prevent the radicalization process, and it's a very inner message to work with a background cause of marginality, social exclusion, which is poverty, marginality, and as my takeaway message to the home that social inclusion needs to be defended as never before. And we even created a YouTube channel, and we have 200 workshops, seminar trainings for our audience, which is frontline workers, which is thousands of family with a child with disability, etc. And it's example that everything is possible if you just doing and trying to use your talent and contribute to country development. And thank you very much for such a several takeaway message and very clear message from yesterday. Our lady from key speaker from Britain, she said that we need to reach schools settings, we need to reach healthcare. And my mandate, we are advocating last 6, 7, 10 years to promote social worker position in middle school.
Please conclude
to empower girls to do as the best to reach full potential, and I hope that we could reach and consult our government. I'm also a member of Human Dimension
I'll
meeting.
have to ask you to conclude now.
Yeah, it's my final message. Thank you very much for such possibility.
Thank you. So we have time for two final speakers, the first of which is the delegation of the Holy See.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. At the outset, the delegation of the Holy See wishes to recall that freedom of religion or belief is the only fundamental freedom explicitly cited among the 10 principles of the Helsinki Final Act. It's therefore essential to ensure that the discourse on freedom of religion or belief is not confined solely to the framework of tolerance and non-discrimination. Rather, the protection of freedom of religion or belief should remain central to the OSCE's comprehensive approach to security, as affirmed in numerous subsequent OSCE commitments. The Holy See considers its duty to insist on the centrality of the freedom of religion or belief, not out of self-interest or disregard for other freedoms, but because this specific freedom of religion or belief constitutes a litmus test for the respect of all other human rights and fundamental freedoms. It truly stands as the cornerstone of all other human rights, since it touches upon the most intimate realm of the human spirit, enabling every human being to act in accordance with the dictates of their conscience, both in private and public life. Indeed, freedom of religion is not simply freedom from persecution. It is a freedom to profess one's faith, either alone or in a community with others, in public or private, in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. Religious freedom encompasses other freedoms, including freedom of thought, conscience, expression, assembly, and association. For religious freedom, which is willed by God and inscribed in human nature to be exercised, there should be no obstacles in its way. In fact, each and every person endowed with reason and free will has a moral obligation to seek the truth, and once it is known, to adhere to it and order his or her lives in accordance with its demands. The dignity of the individual and the nature of the quest for the ultimate truth requires that everyone should be free from constraints regarding religion. Bearing this in mind, a society that respects and promotes freedom of religion or belief unlocks the potential for active and constructive engagement, as well as the advancement of the common good. Indeed, acknowledging the positive contributions that religion can make to society, including its role in promoting peace and security both within and among states, is an important step in overcoming the distorted notion that religion constitutes only a problem. The OSCE's active efforts to protect and promote freedom of religion or belief provide the best guarantee for fostering tolerance, preventing discrimination, and cultivating a common commitment to human dignity and fundamental rights. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. And time for our final intervention from the floor. So I give the floor to the Human Rights Center, Vyasna.
Thank you. My name is Natalia Sasankevich, and I represent Human Rights Center Vyasna from Belarus. I would like to speak about the situation with human rights defenders and the freedom of peaceful assembly in my country. Public human rights work in Belarus is now impossible. It leads directly to arrest. All independent human rights organizations have been liquidated and their members labeled as extremists. This includes our organization, Vyasna. I am on the wanted list in Belarus and in Russia for helping victims of police violence during 2020 protests. My colleagues, Ales Belyatsky, Valentin Stefanovich, Vladimir Lobkovich, and Marfa Rabkova remain behind bars. Ales Belyatsky, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, is serving 10 years sentence right now. They all are punished only for documenting human rights violations and helping other people. Their conditions in prison are harsh: no access to medical care, constant pressure from prison authorities, forced labor, and isolation. Despite this, Vesna continues its work in exile, receiving over 1,000 requests for help every month and supporting victims of repressions and their families. The freedom of peaceful assembly in Belarus has been almost completely destroyed. Any public action critical of the authorities is punished with arrest, torture, and imprisonment. The national law on mass events contradicts international standards. Spontaneous assemblies are banned, and even single-person pickets are treated as illegal. Not a single case of police violence from 2020 and for next 5 years against protesters has been investigated. We ask OSCE participating states to continue systematic and long-term support for the democratic aspirations of Belarusian society, to prioritize the release of all political prisoners in Belarus. Right now, there are more than 1,200 of them, and to support Belarusians and civil society organizations in exile, who continue their human rights work even when they cannot do it at home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have a few minutes remaining. I'd like to turn to our panelists for any final remarks and reflections on the discussion and the interventions. So I'll turn first to Anna Juvenen. Anna, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the very interesting discussion I've had the honor to follow. The discussion has reflected a lot on the diversity of civil society organizations as well as human rights defenders. I would like to highlight two groups that are continuously experiencing various kind of reprisals. Groups working to the realization of the rights of the LGBTIQ+ organizations are under a lot of pressure, and this needs to be highlighted. Another group is the environmental human rights defenders, also in the Western country, also in the EU countries, also in the Nordics, where I come from. The environmental human rights defenders are experiencing also restrictions on their rights. So it is highly important. It is the states that are responsible on realization of these rights. So I call all the participating states to follow the OSCE commitments, but also other human rights conventions from the Council of Europe, UN, soft law, and so forth. And finally, I want to mention something that was also reflected here today, is the visas. It is highly crucial that in the crisis situations, the emergency visas are provided by the host countries, and that the host states reach out to the human rights defenders in order to have meaningful engagement and build trust. And not only but also other temporary location procedures on supporting opening bank accounts. So this is my message. Thank you very much.
Anu, thank you. Mariana Katsarova, do you have any final reflections as well? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, it was an incredible experience to see the majority of the speakers being from civil society and not from member states, which is quite the opposite of what we have at the United Nations. So thank you to the chairperson in office and to the OSCE for being this platform for all voices to be heard. Of course, we heard from human rights defenders who expressed their concern and fear for danger. We saw the first speaker after us being veiled from fear of repression. I don't work on that country, I don't know the details, but one very important message from me, and I have included this in each of my reports on the Russian Federation: reprisals against human rights defenders and civil society or victims and their lawyers for reaching out to the United Nations for cooperation with the human rights mechanisms. I think we have at the United Nations very strong mechanism. The Secretary General every year comes out with a report on against reprisals and intimidation. I think each regional organization, and the OSCE is unique in that sense, it has several regions plus partners for cooperation needs to strengthen that mechanisms within your own organization. Nobody should feel in danger for communication with the OSCE like with the United Nations. The second thing which I heard a lot used was the words terrorism, extremism, counter-terrorism, counter-extremism. I have been documenting for a third year on the situation of human rights in Russia. And let me tell you, counter-terrorism and counter-extremism laws are used to punish speech, not danger, most often in Russia. And this is the topic of my thematic report, which I'm presenting on the 27th October to the General Assembly of the United Nations. How laws of national security, public safety, are abused by the government in order to silence dissent and anti-war expression about the war against Ukraine. And when I heard it from some other parts of the world, we have to be aware that this handbook of repression, which actually I have been monitoring and documenting, coming from the Russian authorities, is easily copied by other states or by in other parts of the world. We have to be aware and go after the real terrorists, the real extremists, and not writers or journalists or human rights defenders. Recently, Boris Akunin, a prominent Russian writer from Georgian origin, actually, has been sentenced to 14 years imprisonment, thank God in absentia, for justification of terrorism only because he expressed his anti-war sentiment against the war against Ukraine. The same happens to journalists who have been writing about Navalny funeral or anything to do with Navalny's organization because it's pronounced by the authorities as extremist. And thank you for mentioning, Anu, for mentioning the LGBT movement in Russia. They're pronounced extremist. The indigenous people's organization in Russia and national minorities in the non-existent separatist movement have been pronounced by the Supreme Court of Russia as extremist, and 172 NGOs have been put in November last year on the list of terrorist individuals and organizations. And most importantly, for all of you, member states in particular, outside Russia, or outside the countries where we heard people are branded and organizations as terrorist or extremist. We need a mechanism, and I've been speaking to the European Union about this, we need a mechanism who puts human rights defenders and how this works on the list of Interpol. And then many countries are receiving these alerts and deporting against non-refoulement, or at least they have a choice to deport or not to deport, human rights defenders, dissidents, anti-war critics, journalists. And we need the mechanisms to see who is on these lists and which country puts whom, because our fight against terrorists and extremists have to be really for the security of the population in the OSCE region or in Europe or around the world, and not as a tool of punishment. And secondly, banks. Boris Akunin, who is a really famous Russian writer, told me, oh my God, I live in London, but now I'm on the list of terrorists because he received a sentence of justifying terrorism. Maybe the English banks would close down my bank accounts. But this happens to in many other countries. When people are put on these lists, particularly by Russia, this is what I'm monitoring, they then have problems with their bank accounts. They're persecuted even in the countries where they found refuge. We need a mechanism for that. Banks are private institutions, but go and talk to the banks in your countries, being governments of these countries, and explain the difference to them. And yes, safety I need to finish. The safety for the civil society. They're true partners, they're the voices of the people that come to us, international institutions and governments, and we need to listen to this voice. The people of the world, I feel, are frightened, so we need to give them hope again. And really, history is made by individuals, not by institutions. Institutions are made up by individuals. So each of us has to carry this light and this hope for the people in our countries and of the world to be free and have fundamental rights. Thank you.
Mariana, thank you very much.
That was long, apologies.
Andres Lederer, final thoughts from you, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. It might be a bit unusual from a civil society figure to start the speech by thanking states, but this is exactly what I'm going to do now, because although we had the pleasure to hear about 30-something representatives of civil society, I also want to highlight that we have heard very clear statements from a number of very important participating states. Those who signed the joint EU statement, the current and the future chair, Finland and Switzerland, the Czech Republic, France, but also Ukraine, for example, who made very clear statements about the importance of the defense of the defenders. And these are not just words, and I just want to underline, because most of those sitting in the room have been in diplomacy for probably most of, if not your entire life. I come from the other side, and hearing these statements are not empty words. And my colleagues who are not here and who cannot be here, not by choice, but by lack of receiving a visa or by the inability to leave their places of detention, they are hearing these words as well, and that is encouragement. So I really want to thank you for those very clear statements. If I can have one minor request, especially to these very outspoken allies of the Helsinki Principles, please convince your colleagues in other international and multilateral bodies to echo these positions. So the next time there is a discussion in the Council of Europe, in the United Nations, lastly but not least in the European Union, think of these principles and make sure that your colleagues are echoing these very principles in those bodies as well. I thank you very much for the opportunity to listen to all these interventions.
Andres, thank you very much. And I'll now conclude by thanking all of you who intervened. And again, thank you to the panelists. Thank you as well to our translators. I will note, thank you, Mariana. I will note that there have been 3 rights of reply that have been notified from Latvia, Greece, and Estonia. Those will be available online if anyone wants to consult those. And finally, I should also note that this is the last thematic plenary session, but of course there are further sessions tomorrow morning, a roundtable with OSCE field missions, that is in the plenary room here, 9 till 10:30, and then the closing session from 11, which will provide participating states with the opportunity to deliver national closing statements, and then with concluding remarks from both ODIHR and from Finland as chair in office. Thank you, all of you, and I will close the session here. Thank you.